What is going on, everyone? The Big Kahuna is back. We are back in the saddle as a team. Warriors this week, 9 to noon, 95-7 the game. A very interesting week for the Dubs as they go 3-1 and remind us why they are must-watch. 3 wins in a row, win last night in Charlotte. Before we dig into it all, we have tons of stuff on our plate for the next 3 hours. Before we do, Dan, my man, what is going on? Dan Devone, everyone.
Where's the applause, man? Give me some great sort of a studio applause.
There we go.
Every single time my name is introduced. Thank you very much, everyone. Yes, it is good to be back. Well, I've been here. Where the hell have you been?
Well, it's been 3 weeks.
You were sitting on Granny's lap in somebody's kitchen.
It was actually my future kitchen. The live working vignettes at Freedman's Appliance were very kind to myself and Mark Graney. But you're right. Yeah, we were basically shoulder to shoulder. We were trying to figure out how we were going to get out of the dishwashing section of the part of the store. And we were taking jokes the whole show. Someone was like, oh, does that mean the Warriors are washed? Are you guys washed up? What's going on here? No, you're right. We were on set last weekend, 12-3, and you and Sterling were able to hold it down. So I appreciate that. You guys sounded really good.
No, it was fun. It was a lot of fun, and, of course, tossing to you guys. And when you're talking about the Warriors, I'm getting to the point where I'm ready to, and for those of you that are watching on YouTube, the hands are clearly held over my head because I don't know what the hell to do or how to explain this team with just 9 games remaining in the season. We've been through the ebb and flow, and quite frankly, I am completely perplexed about just exactly who this basketball team is.
Well, they're must-watch. They are walking content. There is something every single night, whether it's a meaningless Charlotte team that is an absolute dumpster fire, or the game before in Orlando with fireworks popping off 4 minutes in, the game in Miami, the starting lineup gets mixed up. I know that was something that you guys talked about last Saturday, or even a game against Minnesota. So, look, a lot has happened in the last week, and I think you're right. That's where we need to start is, I don't know where you were 7 days ago with this team, and I kind of feel like I don't know where I'm going to be 7 days from now with this basketball team, because they win 3 of 4. They stabilize themselves a little bit more on the road. They got 9 games left. Tomorrow, 4 o'clock against San Antonio. They went from feeling like they were dead to they might go 4-1 on this 5-game road trip.
Well, we've done this before. We've been in this exact same place before. They blow out one of the best teams in the NBA, certainly one of the best teams in the East. It's pretty much Boston and everybody else. I get it. But the second best team, and the team that I think a lot of people feel as though could challenge potentially the Boston Celtics in the East, coming out of the East to the NBA Finals, are the Milwaukee Bucks. And they throttle the Bucks by 35. And this was coming off of a month in which they won 10 of 14 games. They won 3 of 4 of a difficult road trip out East. And so you're buying in again. And what happens the next night? Inexplicably, you lose to Chicago, right? So this ebb and flow, a step forward, 2 steps back. Like, don't overlook San Antonio, because as good as they have been on this road trip, who the hell knows? And that gets right back to where I was starting this show, is that their identity, just when you're ready to embrace them and say, okay, there's the finish line. You're built for the postseason. You have the pedigree. Let's go. And then before you know it, rest assured, they'll get punched in the face when you least expect it.
Well, and that's why, look, last week I thought it was kind of damning. The losses to New York and Indiana at home, I thought showed some flaws and holes in the roster construction, and we were thinking about what kind of decisions you might have to make this summer, and I think I'm still in that camp to some extent, but also looking at the teams they beat this week, a back-to-back in Florida, not easy. Charlotte on the road, that's a game you got to get, but those 2 wins in Florida, to me, are the ones that stood out the most. I mean, obviously, with what happened in Orlando with Draymond getting ejected and the team rallying in spite of him, in spite of Kuminga being out as well for the last 2 games. Klay Thompson was out last night. They win 115-97 going away against the Hornets. But this team, I don't know, Dan, if they're playing their best basketball. Like, they went 11-3 in February. This would be, if they win on Sunday, the first 2 months of the year that they've been above 500. I don't know if they're playing their best basketball, but it feels like they're playing their most complimentary basketball. Like, they're getting contributions from everywhere.
And defensively, I think they've stepped it up. It might be their best defensive basketball, and you're right. They're sharing the basketball. It is clearly not, optimal Golden State Warrior. Again, I go back to that Milwaukee game where Steph is Steph, and the kid, Trace Jackson-Davis, is swatting Giannis on successive plays.
At 3 blocks last night, your boy.
That's the Warriors with that blend of the. How many times have we done shows talking about that mixture of the youth and the veteran leadership on this basketball team? right now, I think what we've seen on this road trip, if we were to characterize the week, I think that might be the operative word, is the character. Yeah. Is that they've shown that they have the fortitude, if you will, that sometimes when you don't necessarily, and especially Steph, who hasn't been at his very best over the last month, you could say, but they're gutting out wins. And I think that win against Orlando, more than maybe anything else this week, without Jonathan Kuminga and surviving, of course, the ridiculous ejection within the opening minutes of Draymond Green. And that, to me, it was a character win. It wasn't pretty, but they knew they needed to win. They knew they were shorthanded. They were on the road, back-to-back. You're at Orlando, a good defensive team, one of those long teams that always gives them problems, and you came out with a win. That's one of those, I hate to use the word, but it was a gut check victory. And there's not a lot of those for this year. So if I was to recap the week, I would say, yeah, physically not at their very best. Steph didn't go off for 40, but I think in terms of proving that they have some onions, if you will, that this is a team that took some shots to the chin, and at the end of the week proved that they have a lot more character and answered some questions, as opposed to there was another avenue they could have gone down, which was clearly taking the pipe and losing to Orlando. And how would that have been in terms of Draymond Green? What would be discussing today had they lost to Orlando on the way? They were without their superstar in Draymond.
Well, and that's why I think these 4 games so far, this 5-game road trip, are significant, because last week, coming off the loss to Minnesota, you're thinking, I didn't necessarily expect them to go in and beat Orlando, but after Draymond gets tossed, you're down your second-best score, I kind of thought they might fold. Like that's a situation where you might see a team that is, kind of limping to the finish line in general. The Houston Rockets are hot on their heels. Apparently, they can't lose a basketball game, and they're still a game back of you for the 10th spot in the Western Conference.
Won again last night.
And they beat Utah by a point. Yeah. And that was another close game as well. They won at OKC in overtime. Granted, SGA didn't play in that game, but Houston can't seem to lose. They've won 11 straight, and now the Warriors are also between, Houston, that's a game back, but also they're a game and a half back of the Lakers, and so they might have a chance to climb a little bit in this play-in tournament. I don't know. To me, this was a week in which, if they did, I would completely understand why the Warriors would fold. I mean, they have not been playing well. They've looked old for about a month. After February, I thought, coming out of the All-Star break, they looked well-rested. They looked rejuvenated. And the best part to me about these 4 games is it hasn't been all Curry. It hasn't. He's been really good when they've needed him to be. He closed out Orlando, but I don't think he was the best player in that game. I thought Andrew Wiggins was. Last night, Wiggins has another 28-8 game. Granted, it's against Charlotte, but in Miami, I thought Klay Thompson was the best player in that game, getting back into the starting lineup. So they've had contributions from everywhere, and if you just look up and down the box scores, the fact that you're not seeing Curry every single game have to be the leading scorer or having to score 30 each and every night, you're getting contributions from Moses Moody in a game like last night. Trace Jackson-Davis is stepping into the starting lineup, and he's been very solid, playing 30 minutes a night when he's needed to. They're getting contributions from everyone, and that's why I was impressed by them not folding this week, coming off of one in which they looked like this was just going to be kind of limp to the finish line, get through these final 10 games, and then we'll see this summer. No, they dug deep, and I feel like it all started in that game against Orlando.
It's still, you're right, look at Steph Curry carrying the load to this point. He's tired and he's 36, I think is the best way to sum it up when you think about Steph and where he's at, which is why, and it's not going to happen, if ever there was a team that needed to get to the 6th seed, it's the Golden State Warriors. And the reason why, they needed that week off.
Yeah.
This is a team that, did you see Chris Paul on the back-to-back in that game against Orlando? He had no legs. Like, these veterans, this time of the year, this is when it catches up to you. And yeah, Steph hasn't been quote-unquote Steph, and it's been Klay, and also you get the huge contributions from Wiggins. But now going forward, it's just about the consistency. You know what you're going to get out of Steph, but can you get those consistent numbers from Andrew Wiggins? Or is he going to climb back into a hole and disappear for another week? Because you can't afford that to happen. Can Klay Thompson, turn that corner and let that not be necessarily an aberration or the outlier, but let that Klay Thompson performance be sort of indicative of what it is that you can expect from here on out? That's the big question, and it's something that's hovered over this team right from the outset. that if Steph Curry at age 36, he begins to sort of slow down a bit, and he'll turn it on in the postseason, but who can push you across the finish line? And it's good to see Andrew Wiggins. But before we buy in, I think I can speak for a lot of people in Dub Nation that you need to see it over a consistent, or at least over a string of games before he can anoint him as being that guy again.
Evan Giddings and Dan Devone back in the saddle here on Warriors This Week, 9 to noon, every Saturday morning on 95.7 The Game, talking Dubs with you. Welcome to the Comcast Business Text Line. 888-957-9570 is the number. Already won from your boy from the 510, Dan. Let the Warriors jacket 9 more games.
Boy.
Come on. We see you filing in on YouTube and Twitch, powered by First NorCal Credit Union. Good morning to all. As we welcome you in, again, you can hit the phone lines, 888-957-9570. What did you take away from this week that was for Golden State? So far, they're 3-1 on the road. They had a gut check victory in Orlando, perhaps their most significant one as of late, considering what was at stake. And to me, Dan, that's the game that really just stands out for this week for multiple reasons. Because I was curious that the tenor and the tone after that game was doing post. And, of course, Draymond gets ejected, and people are pissed, and people are riled. Steve Kerr, a day later on this station, called it something that was unforgivable. And Curry was emotive, and he was expressive, and they somehow rallied to win that game. And I wonder, because I heard some people saying, well, the coverage would have been worse, or it would have been more damning if the Warriors had lost that game. But in a way, I felt like the fact that they rallied and galvanized themselves without their quote-unquote heart and soul, without their emotional leader, might have spoken more than if they had folded and lost that basketball game.
I'm at a point now where I'm just sort of desensitized to the whole thing when it comes to Draymond. It's baked in. Mm-hmm. There was a time he punches Jordan. How many times have we been here? And how many times have we heard a similar sort of reaction from that of the fan base and or the teammates or coaches? Unforgivable. I can't believe what it is that he did. Selfish. I mean, it dominated the networks the next day. It dominated social media. I've seen it so many times. I've been here so many times. And God bless Draymond, because now he's not even dealing with an apology. His apology was basically, you're making a lot out of nothing.
Did he apologize?
Well, he was on his podcast. Yeah. It was sort of, not really. And he's getting to the point where I think Draymond's like, I don't even want to hear myself say the same crap. Like, I need some help. I can't do that to my team. I'm going to go internal and see what sort of demons I'm dealing with. I got to fix some things in my life. I let my team down. He's at the point like, this is me, all right? Maybe when my career's done, I'll deal with rage or whatever the hell's going on with me. But for now, you just got to live with this. The one thing that sort of sticks out at me, though, is as much as we talk about how smart of a basketball player he is, and he is, he's very cerebral on the court, but he's one of the biggest idiots in the same vein at the same time. How you can get kicked out of that game with Houston on your heels and the back-to-back without Jonathan Kuminga, that's something a stupid player would do.
Well, speaking of kicks, there was a play against Charlotte last night where he got tangled up with Grant Williams, and it might have been before the offensive foul, but Grant Williams kind of pushed him off his spot, and he flung that leg in a nether region that Steven Adams is well aware of, and he was a foot away, I think, from catching hell again. I mean, it does feel like only a matter of time. And I think that there was a quote after the game from Slater about there was an anonymous executive that essentially said, like, did you really expect that Draymond was never going to get ejected from a game again? Did you really buy, like, it was a fool's gold? But to me, the difference was, I wouldn't expect him to get ejected from that kind of game. Like, if they lose that game, Dan, right now they're tied with Houston for the 10 seed. And you may say, well, it's a 10 seed. What are they playing for? But because of Curry's emotional outpour, this part of the season, and I don't think it's a coincidence that this week they dug deep on the road, a place that they've been more connected certainly than at Chase Center, where they're sub 500 still. They looked like a team that was not ready to say goodbye to this season. They looked like a team that was not done. And no matter if it was Draymond or if Kuminga was out or whoever was not going to be available that night for their own reasons or not, this season still means something to them. Like, the 10 seed still means something to the aging veterans, to the young players, and it almost feels like they're playing for pride at this point. And that's why I'm locked into these last 9 games, is because I don't know what I'm going to see, but it does feel like their backs have been up against the wall for the majority of the season. And finally, they're a season high 5 games above 500 right now. But this is a team that is looking still for something, whether it's on a night or a week, to just give them a kick in the rear end. And I don't think that Draymond did that by getting ejected from that game. But the Warriors, in spite of him, were able to still find it. And I thought that was pretty significant.
I think when it comes to Draymond Green, if you're thinking that he's going to get traded, if anybody out there thinks that they need to move him, the only reason he will get dealt, or if he doesn't live out his contract with the Golden State Warriors, is because his play on the court will slip, or that he's no longer the same defender, or he's clearly a step slower and he can't match up. He doesn't have the same intensity. He can't run the show offensively. He's missing guys on those backdoor, the lob to the dunker spot. Isn't that all those things that he does? That's the parameter by which he will be measured by. All the other stuff, it's just who he is at this point. I know that sounds ridiculous, and I know that should carry more weight, but we have been down this road. We're going on years, and it's accelerated over the last couple of years. What will happen, because we've been through this so many times, I can pretty much tell you that this will dissipate. He'll behave for a couple of more games. He might flare up and do something completely out of control in the postseason. And then we'll take similar calls of like time to get rid of him. But this is who he walks that razor's edge, right? He looks right over the cliff and he dares someone to push him. That's who he is as a basketball player. And I almost feel like that's who he has to be in order to be an effective basketball player. And that's just not going to change. The only reason you would move him, and I'm convinced that this is who the Warriors are, they just re-upped him after everything he did a year ago, is that if on the court, physically, he begins to show signs just like anybody else, when you're passing judgment as to whether or not you should keep or cut bait, it's just going to be predicated exclusively on his talent, on that 94 feet slab of hardwood, and that's it.
But I do think the body of work throughout this season leads me to believe that this summer there's a lot that could happen. Whether it's Klay Thompson's impending free agency, whether it's a potential trade involving Kuminga, although I think that's unlikely. That's probably how you're going to have to go get a big boy involving JK. Perhaps it's trying to move off of one of your two albatross contracts right now, because the two people that are locked up for the longest period of time are Draymond Green and Andrew Wiggins. They're both going to be around right now as it stands for 3 more seasons. Do you try and cut bait with one of those two players? Do you try and go out and acquire a free agent that can help you around the edges? Is there someone, a superstar after a flame out of a postseason series that wants out of their place? I think there's a lot that is still left on the table for the Warriors this summer. And to me, anything is on the menu outside of Stephen Curry. That to me is what I think changed on Wednesday, for me at least, that I would have had Draymond in that camp as well, that he's just going to be around and he's going to be here. And as long as he's still their best defensive player, he's their guy. But if you look at the 4 ejections this season, he's got 3 years left. You can't get tossed from games. You can't get suspended. You can't put your team in compromising positions at an increasingly larger rate year after year after year. I agree. This is who he's been. This is who he is. But it's never been this frequent. And I think when we saw Curry just look emotionally spent in the moment, and then the team rally in spite of their guy not being on the floor, to me, that did open my eyes, along with Kirk calling what it was for unforgivable. I do think there's a little bit more of a shift there. And I'm not saying that Draymond's not going to be on the team next year, but I do think that he is, you talk about that razor-thin line. I don't know what's thinner than a razor. Maybe it's a hair. Maybe it's, I don't know, like a micro thread. But that line that he's walking has never been smaller or thinner, in my opinion. And is he going to, I couldn't answer that right now. Is he going to be on the team next season? I don't know. I felt like before Wednesday, I would have told you, yeah, obviously, duh.
But I guess I would push back that if he's dealt or he's not on the basketball team, it's because the Warriors felt as though they could improve. It wouldn't necessarily be because,
they don't need him.
Morally, we can't be with this guy, or he's too much of a threat with the extracurricular activities. For crying out loud, they just re-upped him to a 4-year deal after he slugged a teammate, and that, compounded with everything else that he had done historically throughout his career with the suspensions and the ejections, he punches a teammate, Jordan Poole out the door. We're going to re-up Draymond Green. Why did Draymond Green stay and Jordan Poole leave? Because Draymond Green is a bigger asset physically. I would say this to your point, that when it comes to Dunleavy, I will, we want to sit up here with a live mic and pretend like we know what the hell's going on. When it comes to the offseason, I have no idea what it is that Dunleavy's going to do. And if Dunleavy moves Draymond Green, moves Klay Thompson, moves Jonathan Kuminga, I wouldn't be surprised because he doesn't have that allegiance like that of Bob Myers and Draymond Green. I think that when it comes to Dunleavy and changing this team and making the quote-unquote blowing it up, that's very much on the table because I have absolutely no idea what it is that he's going to do. And as we talk about Dunleavy for a second, I was thinking about this on the flight back to do this show with you because, I come from, I crisscross the country to find my man Ev. Where would this team be without the youngsters this year? In all seriousness, as much as we focus on Draymond, we can get back to the Draymond conversation. And Steph has been Steph, although he's dipped off considerably. But think about it. Pajemski, Trace Jackson-Davis, even Moody, Jonathan Kuminga.
Yeah.
Were all players at the beginning of the season that were peripheral players at best. I think Pajemski was expected to even see the court. Same with Trace Jackson-Davis. And, Jonathan Kuminga, that relationship was on again and off again. Where would this team be now, as opposed to when they started the season and they said, okay, we got Chris Paul, we got our foundation, we got Wiggins, this is our team. Where would they be with these players that were sort of at the beginning of the year discarded as these guys who were taking up spots at the end of the bench now have slid to the forefront of what it is that the Warriors are doing? I'm just curious if we were to revisit this. Where would this basketball team be right now? I think you're 14 or 15 games out, and you're not even thinking about the 10 seed.
No, I think the Rockets have already caught you. I think that's the case. Now, I wouldn't go as far as to say the kids are more important than the core at this point. But you're right. They've needed each other. I mean, and that's to me why this road trip to me has been a place where the Warriors are playing complementary ball more than they have because they've been reliant on younger players. They've still needed Curry and Draymond and Klay and Wiggins and Chris Paul. They've needed older players to mesh with the younger guys. And this transfusion of experience or inexperience has put them in a place where now they're fighting for the 10. And I don't think with either side, if it was just young guys on this team, I also think they'd be 15 or 16 games back. But you're right. They've been more dependent on younger players than they have perhaps at any point in this dynasty. And it does make you feel optimistic about the future and potentially making a tough choice this summer. The one that Mike Dunleavy Jr. Wright is going to have to make. All right, 888-957-9570 is the number. That's Dan Devone. My name is Evan Giddings. We're here on Warriors This Week up until 12 every Saturday morning on 95.7 The Game. Let's go down to San Jose and talk to our guy, Austin. Wants to talk about the past week. What's up, Austin? How you doing?
Hey, fellas. Happy Saturday. Listen, I guess the question is if you believe what you've seen over the last week or so in improved play, or if you believe what you've seen over the balance of the most of the season, which tells you the team isn't very good. So I hate to come off as start the show with some little bit of negativity, but I'm more in the camp of believing what I've seen over the balance of the season, and that's that the team is at times exciting. Yeah, they can beat some teams they're not supposed to beat, but they haven't been consistent all year. So I think if you're looking at the future, you say to yourself, okay, we've seen some improvement, which is good, by the way, because if Wiggins is playing better and guys like Moody, who I'm not a big fan of, I think Moody's just a piece that should be moved in the offseason. But you can use these guys now for trade bait. I mean, if they're playing better, that makes them more valuable as opposed to, stinking the place up. So I think the better they play in the last 10 games, either way it's going to be better for the Warriors in the future. So I think that's the one thing that gives me hope. And remember, guys, as much as we're talking about improvement, we're still talking about the 10th seed on a team that's supposed to have a core of veterans that have won championships, that are paid a lot of money. So I think we have to be careful about going too crazy with them winning a few games against teams that really, in dog days of the NBA, a lot of guys are undermanned, guys are hurt. So you got to be a little careful about throwing too much at them. But I would say that I'm encouraged. I do have a lot of faith in Dunleavy, believe it or not. I think he is going to make some major moves in the offseason. I really do. And I think they have to make some, guys. You can't bring back the team that's played this year. I mean, I like these guys, the Joe Hustle guys that come off the bench. That's great. but these don't make good teams. Those guys are good. GP2, Moody, those guys are good when you have a good team. But they need more skilled players on the wings. They need guys that can defend. I would not bring back Klay Thompson. I'm sorry. I'd let him go back and see if he can get some money in free agents. Let's see what he can get, right? I would not bring back Wiggins. I would try to trade him if I can, right? You move Looney, then you go from there. I mean, you got to bring in another big boy. I like JK. Keep JK. Keep young kid in the center, right? Keep Podziemski. But as far as I'm concerned, after that, guys, I'm open to trading almost anybody. I don't know. What do you guys think? I'm not encouraged about keeping everybody coming back with the same roster next year, guys. Come on. Talk to you later.
No, I think those are interesting points, and that's where I kind of want to move towards as we set up our break and head into the next segment, Dan, is it's not about the week itself. I mean, a lot's changed. A lot has happened in the micro, and I think the Orlando game is probably the best example of that. But look, he's right. They are 5 games above 500. That's the best place they've been this year. The totality of the year would tell you they're an average basketball team, 18th in the NBA. But are they able to do enough down the stretch of this year? And I would say really since they figured out that Kuminga and Wiggins and Green could play all together, have they done enough to prove to you that there doesn't need to be wholesale changes? Because to me, I still think there has to be a move this summer, and you can't just run back the same thing and expect it to change. And that's where I guess I'm at with Draymond as well. And I wonder where people are at in general is, do you expect anything to change, or are you kind of just stuck in the moment a little bit off a nice road trip? They got San Antonio tomorrow at 4:00. Then they got Dallas on Tuesday. They got the Mavericks coming up. They got a big game with Houston on Thursday next week. Are you still wait and see with this team? What do you make of this team, and what did you make of this week? Are you still looking at it from a bird's eye view like Austin, or do you feel like this is a team that's beginning to discover something different about themselves as they trail towards the final 9 games?
Before we go to the break, let me just say that I'm with Austin, man. Put the TNT, yell to everybody, fire in the hole, put on your hard hat, and blow this thing up. We'll talk about it.
Wow, that's a tease, people. That's Dan Devone. The Big Kahuna's back in the saddle with your boy Evan Giddings right here on Warriors This Week. We're back after this, 95.7 The Game.
What are you working on today? Brakes? We can save you 15% on that. We have OE quality Duralast brake pads and rotors in stock, ready for pickup.
That's the jam right there, Kenny.
All right, this is Warriors This Week. Evan Giddings and Dan Devone with you. Ken on the ones and twos in the background. We got you locked here until noon. Dan, look, I know that you jump in the bay once a day, it feels like, maybe twice sometimes. You're a little cold-blooded, but you sounded really cold-blooded at the end of that last segment. Blow it up, get the TNT. I mean, did the last week prove nothing to you about this Golden State Warriors team?
Here's the thing that you have to keep an eye on.
Oh, I got my eyes centered.
Everybody in the West is getting better. Can you say that the Golden State Warriors are becoming a better basketball team? Because that's applicable to just about everybody in the West, who, by the way, are all much significantly younger than that of the Warriors. Are the Warriors getting better, or are they getting older? This year, you may be able to Heisman the Houston Rockets and stave them off at the finish line. That ain't happening next year. Why? Because Jalen Green's going to be a year older. Şengün is going to be a year older. All those boys.
They don't play well together, Dan.
Are going to get, they've been much better with Şengün out.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I thought I could just run that by. I should have known that with Evan in the house, man. He knows what's up. But you know what I'm saying. Same with Houston. Same with Minnesota. Same with, you can even say that's applicable to that of the Denver Nuggets. Can you say that about the Golden State Warriors?
I think they've gotten better this season because they've had to get younger. I mean, they haven't had a choice. Like, that's, I think, a major theme of this year is the vets. I mean, you said it in the first segment. I think you're spot on. If the kids weren't around this year, this Warriors team would be in turmoil. They would be in a downward spiral more so than they were during the beginning of March, in which they started, I think, 5-7 in the first 12 games. They'd be stuck in December. If you got an absence, with whether Draymond getting suspended, Wiggins being up and down, Klay Thompson, who overall this season hasn't shot it particularly well, but has been better since he's been moved to the bench and now back into the starting lineup. No, you're right. Like, the kids have been necessary for this season to stay afloat. Now, it also means it's been staying afloat. How do you get better? That's the question that the Warriors are going to have to ask themselves this summer. And I think a major part of that is the internal growth. But I guess the question also then becomes, how do you springboard that? Like, how do you provide runway for some of your younger players to improve to the point where you can get better both internally and then, I don't think there's a guy out there right now that the Warriors can trade for or acquire that's all of a sudden just going to come in and sweep us off our feet and take us back to the promised land. But I do think that an addition by subtraction in certain areas can help the Warriors contend in a way that they have for the last 2 months of the season. The question is, how can you find more consistency? How can you find more balance? And that's, to me, where the kids have been able to uplift and get the aging core into positions. Like, for example, against Orlando, Andrew Wiggins was best player on the floor in that game in my mind. Curry didn't have a great game. He had like 17 and 10. He was passing the ball well, didn't turn it over much. But younger players in that game helped Curry get to the point where he could take over in the final couple of possessions. I don't think Steph, Draymond, Klay are in positions anymore to just will the Warriors to wins. I mean, Curry scored 60 points and they lost to an Atlanta Hawks team this year. They need everyone more than ever. But it doesn't mean that Curry or Klay or Dre can't be good for stretches of games. They just have to figure out a way to kind of get those guys into positions where they can grab the momentum of a game.
Listen, Steph Curry isn't going anywhere. And I'll even amend that. I was looking at the teams in front of the Golden State Warriors. To be rather frank with you, Ev, the Warriors could be looking at, if they want to stay the course and continue to cobble this thing together with the core and this aging group and these youngsters who are, to Austin's point, that he kicks off the show, and he's right. These are good players, but they're more sort of on the periphery. Like Podziemski's a good player, but he's not a star in this league. Trace Jackson-Davis could be potentially, or he could just be a very good center. Jonathan Kuminga might be the one guy that potentially could have, all-star games in his future. But the Golden State Warriors, the reason why they need to make drastic changes is because not only is everybody getting better in front of them because they're younger, they need to look over their shoulder because Houston is getting older and better and more experienced. I'll tell you what, Memphis, when Ja comes back, don't expect them to be the perennial doormat every year. They could be on the heels of the Golden State Warriors, and I will throw the team that they are going to see next, the San Antonio Spurs, who are accelerating simply because of that alien they got at center in Wembanyama. And just a shout out to San Antonio, by the way, is that if you think this is a 2 to 4 or 5 year plan around Wembanyama, think again. You need to start winning next year. So Popovich and company, the grace period is done. Otherwise, Wembanyama is up and out of there. That aside, there are teams, because everybody is young, and now with every passing year, with every passing game, they get experience and they become much better. The Golden State Warriors are becoming old and getting older. And that, I think, is really wherein lies the problem going forward when you think about this team next year. You can't do another season of, will Wiggins show up tonight? Oh, Klay Thompson has disappeared the last week. Meanwhile, Steph is logging 35 minutes and doing the best to keep this thing afloat.
But you also just can't completely tear it down because of the guy you just mentioned. Like that's I think, the difficult job that Mike Dunleavy has ahead of him.
Blowing up doesn't mean rebuild, by the way, just to clarify.
What in your mind would be blowing it up?
Meaning making drastic changes to the team. Blowing it up meaning getting rid of the core, getting rid of the foundational pieces that we've grown so accustomed to. You know, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, Wiggins, Looney, all of these guys that have been part of the fabric for over a decade out the door, and bringing back compatible or upgrading with younger talent. I know that's easier said than done. Thank God I'm not done.
Well, to me, that does sound like a rebuild.
Well, not if you're getting a star, not if you're getting somebody that is going to be that person or filling that void that we have discussed ad nauseum throughout the entire season, that now becomes a star next to Steph Curry. That's not a project. That's not Kuminga where we're talking about maybe potentially in 2 years he could be that guy. Somebody who's that guy right now. Maybe it's DeJounte Murray, who went for 40 last night.
Well, he also took 44 shots.
Yeah, exactly. You are good, brother. Nothing gets past you.
You got to get up 44.
You got to get up awfully early in the morning to get one by my man Evan. But you know what I'm saying? They need to bring back a star. So when I say blow it up, I mean get rid of all of these players that have been synonymous with the Golden State Warriors and bring back talent so that you can win right now. But it's just you're changing the guard, so to speak.
Look, I think again, anyone beyond Curry to me is on the table. But you got to find pieces that will be better than the ones you currently have. And that's why honing in on someone like Draymond Green, Wednesday was significant to me from the standpoint that I think if he gets run from that game before that week, I mean, that game's over. And that's a game you need. Like, I thought they were not going to win that basketball game when he got ejected. And because Wiggins was really good. I thought because Curry did enough down the stretch. The bench. Trace Jackson-Davis played like 34 minutes in that game. Had 14 rebounds. Moses Moody made a couple of hustle plays even though he couldn't hit a shot. Hit 4 last night. But you know what I'm saying? Like, there are players on this team that I think are ready to step in and step up. The question is how competitive can you be? I don't know if it's out of the question that if they make some wholesale changes like you're asking for this summer, that they can't be a 10 seed. Now, that's not what people want, but I don't know, Dan, how you're going to make a 10-win jump from wherever they finish this season. It'll maybe be around 44 wins, which is where they were last year. I don't know how you immediately jump into the 50-win echelon and also strip parts down. Like, that to me they don't equate. And so I'm not an advocate of running it back. I do think there needs to be changes this summer, but you're going to have to hit on a lot of moves if you want to be back into contention because of what you're also talking about, which is the West being really competitive. And yes, there's teams behind you got to think about, San Antonio, Memphis, I don't know, maybe Houston, but how are you going to jump Minnesota? Like, how are you going to jump Denver? How are you going to jump even the Clippers, who are an aging team? How are you going to jump Phoenix? How are you going to jump Dallas? Like, there are so many teams above the Warriors, and some of them are aging, but most of them are going to be right back and be good next year.
Better.
Or better, like OKC.
No doubt. But what gives you a better chance of jumping them? The status quo or rolling the dice and bringing in some stars? And trying to find, that guy that can play. Listen, if you were to take Steph Curry away from the Golden State Warriors, and we've seen this. They're terrible. Sometimes Clay can be good. Andrew Wiggins, who the hell knows? But they don't have a bona fide, well, all right, Tatum's out, Jaylen Brown, you got to go off tonight. Even Jokic, you might be the one other team where that scenario is applicable, where they're sort of one-dimensional. Jokic is out, but I'd rather take Jamal Murray or especially the way Michael Porter Jr. has been playing over the last month. I'd take him over anybody who's the Golden State Warriors are going to substitute for Steph Curry. You take any star away from any other relevant team in the NBA, and I can point to 2, maybe 3 guys that you could say, okay, well, they have the ability to pick up the pace. When it comes to the Golden State Warriors, if you took Steph Curry out of the mix 5-10 years ago, yeah, Klay Thompson will be all right. You're gonna get numbers from Kevin Durant. Now it's become ludicrous to the point of, well, Klay Thompson at this stage of his career, he's going to be your go-to. I mean, who is it? And that has to be addressed. And in order to bring in that bona fide, established, somebody that's stamped as an NBA-proven star, you're going to have to give it up or give up pieces or quote-unquote blow things up.
Well, and this is, I think part of it too, is just the inconsistency from players, whether it's on the court or off the court. Mac Life CEO on YouTube, powered by First NorCal Credit Union, not having one of your best players getting suspended for 25 games, that would help. You're right. When Draymond's been on the court, he's been pretty good. Has he been all-time Draymond? Has he been DPOY? Not anymore, but he's been their best defensive player. His issue is that he can't keep himself on the court. Klay Thompson at the beginning of the year couldn't shoot it consistently enough. Andrew Wiggins, and this is more of an indictment of his season, but last night was just the second time this year he's had back-to-back 20-point games, in which he's also been a plus. Even last year, Wiggins had, I think, 2 or 3 stretches of 3 or 4 straight games scoring 20. So what are you going to get from Wiggins on a given night? I mean, to me, in a way, the floor players, some of the younger guys have in a way been more consistent than some of the older guys outside of Steph. Even Chris Paul looked like he was lost in the back-to-back in Florida. He didn't have any legs under him against Orlando or Miami. I mean, I know these kids aren't ready yet, and I don't think Podziemski or Moody or even Trace Jackson-Davis, who I've really enjoyed watching as a starter, I don't know if those guys are ready yet to carry the load of an 82-game year, more so than they're having to do. I mean, we saw Podziemski run up against a wall, and that's why he's back on the bench in a role he probably should be. But are those guys ready to take a Kuminga-type leap? I think that's a little unfair to ask. And so the question about what to do this summer, in a way, I think will be determined by the final 9 games and how they look going into an elimination game. But what I'm looking for, Dan, and what we've been searching for more so than anything else has just been consistency from the best players or the players that are supposed to be carrying you.
What's interesting is that the new framework by which we look at the end of the season, and this was the intent when they brought in the play-in game, which was what, 4 or 5 years ago?
Yeah. A few years. Well, the pandemic
years
year.
Ago.
Pandemic year, yeah.
2019. Think about this. When I was growing up, my entire life, and the majority of your young life as well, Ev, there were 8 teams to go to the playoffs prior to 2019.
Warriors ain't one of those teams.
What's the narrative? If this is pre-2019, I know this is why Adam Silver and the brain trust that are the executives out there in Madison Ave in New York City, they decided to extend this thing to keep the level of interest. And so that people like you and I have something to chew on and are not talking about next year. But just let's think about where this team would be and what it is we're talking about if this was pre-2019. You're talking about a team that's missed the playoffs and a team that is, what's the conversation then? Right now, we're still hanging on to a 10 seed simply because it's a recent creation on the part of the NBA, again, to maintain a level of interest for teams like that of the Golden State. The Warriors, think about how far we've fallen here. The Warriors typically are looking for, what are they going to be, a 1 seed? When they won the title, they were a 3 seed. Last year, they slipped to a 6. And now we've gotten to the point where you're trying to scratch and claw and do whatever it is that you can to get in as a 10. I think we have to keep things in perspective as just to where this team is at. And I know, listen, getting into the postseason in a playing game, they can make a run. I'll still stand by that. But I think at times we also have to take a step back and sort of look at this through the glasses of if this was, this is just 5 years ago. this is a team that's not going to the postseason?
I don't think they're making a run beyond the play-in tournament. I mean, right now they're matched up with Minnesota. They beat Denver last night, so they pretty much have their hands. Like they get to determine who the one is.
They'd see Minnesota if they get past the play-in?
Yeah. I don't think they're beating Minnesota.
What is Minnesota?
I don't think they're beating Denver now.
Yeah, but see, Denver, I would say no.
All three of those teams are 51-win teams. OKC, Minnesota, Denver.
But are you willing to bet, your kid's college tuition, that whoever that kid is, there's a twinkle in some girl's eye out there. But are you willing to bet the tuition that they can't beat? They can't beat Minnesota. Minnesota, OKC. Just think about, the Warriors. Just think about that Warrior team against Milwaukee, that team. Now, listen, are they going to be underdogs in that series? Yeah. Am I going to be completely...
I think they could win a game. I think they could maybe even win 2 games. But winning the best of 7 across 2 weeks in a playoff series against a team that has been better than you all year.
Have they, though? Have you seen Minnesota play the Warriors and you walk away and go, man, that team is head and shoulders over the Golden State Warriors. They just got spanked by 25 again. No, the majority of those games are hanging in the balance, going right down to the nub.
But you can make the same case about Denver.
Yeah, but Denver, I think, since the All-Star break and since Jokic sent out that team text like, let's go, boys, to me, are more dangerous than Boston, simply because they did it a year ago.
No, I think Denver's the best team in the NBA, but the point about the head-to-head, like the Warriors were in games, 3 of them, against Denver at the beginning of the season, around Christmas, and then, of course, the 16-point blown lead in the fourth quarter. Like, they've hung with the Nuggets.
Jokic just buzzer beater.
But they haven't beaten them in 2 years.
Yeah, but I think that's a little fool's goal because I think Denver is in a separate place than everybody. Minnesota, OKC, all those teams that they've been right there with don't necessarily instill a level of fear like that of Denver. So could they beat Minnesota? Certainly anything can happen, but I don't think it's beyond the realm of possibilities if the Warriors advance over a team like OKC in Minnesota. Now, they're going to have to play a lot better, but it certainly can happen.
Yeah, and they could also get bounced in the first round of the play-in by the Lakers. Or I don't know. I also think, too, it's...
which is why making this show is so difficult, because you're right. Both things are true.
Going into the playoffs last year when they were a 6 seed and they had a solidified first round, I thought they were going to beat Sacramento. And Sacramento was a better team. They were a 3 seed. Over the regular season, they were a better team. I do not feel the same way about any of those top 4 seeds this year if the Warriors happen to match up. And really, it's the top 3. It's Denver, Minnesota, OKC. Even a young Thunder team, to me, is far scarier than what the Sacramento Kings were last year. And this year, to be honest. But that is kind of where the Warriors are at again. And I think it's like this revolving door of getting to the place where could the Warriors be dangerous? Could they make a run? Could they do this? Yes, yes, yes. So why are they a 10 seed? Is it just because of self-inflicted wounds? Is it because of moments like Wednesday where Draymond getting kicked out of games? Is it because they haven't gotten this two-way Wiggins that we've seen the last 2 games? Is it because Klay Thompson is inconsistent shooting throughout the years? Because Curry's 36 years old? It's because of a confluence of factors that this team is stuck right now, only 5 games above 500 for the second time this year. They were 5 games below 500 midway through the season. We don't know which side of 500 is going to show up on a given night. And so that is what makes this team so difficult to dissect. But I think to your larger point about what needs to be done this summer, there has to be action, because you cannot put yourself in a position where we're wishing again, where we're hoping again, because it seems like, Dan, we've been stuck in the mindset of hope with the Golden State Warriors since they won the championship and since they started out 2-7 last year. And we're just going to run things back and relying on the vets and the best 5-man unit and all the rest. We're telling ourselves again and again and again that this team can muster and conjure up some sort of postseason magic when they haven't even been able to do it through 82 games.
What did Bill Parcells say? You are what your record is. So as much as we can talk about the suspensions and all those clutch games that they've lost, this is who you are. What's interesting about who they are this year, it's very similar to who they were a year ago. This has been the same team basically over the last 2 years. What's happened, again, is that the West is becoming more competitive and these youngsters are growing up. So the Warriors, I think, finished last year, I want to say 6 games over 500. They're going to be about 6 games over 500 potentially this year. A year ago, they were able to avoid the play-in tournament altogether. Mm-hmm. And now they're scratching to go in as a 10 seed. I stole that from Steve Kerr. I think he said that last night. And so that just goes to show you how better the West is getting. And also the Golden State Warriors are sort of stuck at mid-gear. Like they're pretty much the same team they were a year ago if you look at their record, which is going to be about 5 to 6 games over 500.
Yeah, this is from the Comcast Business text line. Again, the number is 888-957-9570. That's Dan DeVoe. My name is Evan Giddings. This is Warriors This Week on 95.7 The Game from the 530. Dubs can avoid Denver in the first round. They will beat OKC or Minnesota in a playoff series. There's also hope from the 661, where the West fears the Dubs winning the play-in and playing this team in the playoffs. I guess I would ask, from what we've seen, yes, they have some marquee wins. They beat Milwaukee. Your favorite game of the year against Boston. They beat Boston at home. They've had some close victories against good teams. But has this team shown you that they deserve to not be dismantled, to not be rearranged, to not be dissected at the end of this year? I mean, I think that's in a way what we're kind of seeing. Like, they're fighting, but in a way, it feels like a lot of these players are fighting for whatever remains in their basketball lives, at least the older guys. Curry he's not going anywhere, but he's fighting for pride because that's the point in his career at age 36 in which he still has something to prove. Klay Thompson is playing for a contract. Draymond Green might not be playing for a contract, but he's clearly playing for this sort of idea that he can prove that he's not the problem child that he's been all year. Like, he's trying to prove that he's changed or that he's grown. And while I might not be seeing it, and Wednesday certainly doesn't point me in that direction, there's something that each player at their stage is playing for right now. And that's, to me, the biggest change in 1 week that I've seen, is that they do look like a team that is not just going to pack and mail it in. They don't care that the Rockets have won 11 games in a row, not because they're the Rockets, but because the season ain't over yet. That doesn't mean that there aren't questions that they're going to have to answer this summer. But what I liked about this last week, and what I've liked about really the entire road, I mean, they're 21-16 or 21-15 on the road, is that they still got some gumption. Like, they still got some fight. And that's what I see on a nightly basis from this team.
The problem with the Warriors, again, just gets back to age. And when you're old, I get more than any other team, just to reiterate, they needed to go in as a 6 seed to get that week off, to get those 6 days off. Could they beat OKC? I believe they could in a 7-game series. Could they beat Minnesota? Yes. I've said that all year long. The reason why they most likely won't, it's not because those teams are better. It's simply because they don't have enough gas in the tank to play in games and then take on those teams. Like, they just don't. They can't be North Carolina State. Shout out Wolfpack. You go through the AC tournament and you win 5 games in a row, and then you make a run in the tournament. Yeah, you can do that.
DJ Burns.
You can do that from 18 to, yeah, big fella, go get it. 18 to 22, you can do that. Not when you're 34 and 37 and 35, respectively. Like, that, to me, is really where this thing sort of begins and ends, that they just don't have the legs to go play in, and then OKC, Minnesota, Denver, and Sacramento.
Well, I hate to break it to you, Dan, but that means you're not as good. Like, if you can't summon it, if you can't muster it, that means you're not as good. And that's why the Warriors are in a place where they're at. But again, they've won 3 in a row on the road, back-to-back games from two-way wigs. And I do want to focus in on a couple of these players because, to me, we've been talking a lot about the young guys, and I think there's a spot in the conversation for the steps that TJD's taken. Last night it was Moses Moody who found his 3-point shot. Kuminga's been out the last 2 games, but they're hoping to get him back soon. But the big 3 specifically, as we move into the second hour of Warriors This Week on 95.7 The Game, the big 3, they have questions to answer, both about this season and about their lives moving forward. Did we see a potential inflection point on Wednesday in Orlando? Will we see an inflection point this summer as Klay Thompson becomes a free agent? As people think about what Draymond Green has left in the tank, about what Steph Curry might have left in the tank. Where are you at with the big 3 right now in regards to the Warriors' chance to contend this year, but more importantly, how they can get back into contention? 888-957.
I got another quick tease before we go. The big question, which we also want to answer when we come back, is can the Big Maple, Zach Edey, and DJ Burns play in the NBA? I need answers, Evan. I need answers. I gotta fill out the dance card, bro.
888-957-9570. That very entertaining man is Dan Devone. Evan Giddings with you back after this 95.7 The Game.
Want more speed? Then you're in luck because Xfinity just...
All 32 teams. Just give me a team. All right? You don't want to play along? I'll give you a team.
Memphis.
Memphis is a team that is too. God, you give me the most difficult team. Memphis is a team that is clearly rebuilding.
OKC.
That is not. Memphis isn't going to the playoffs.
Yeah.
Ja Morant is hurt. The majority of your entire team has been hurt. That's what you talk about. All right? Open the door, shut the door, move on. Take a caller from I'm trying to think of some random small city out there in Memphis. But that's it, man. That's in the state of Tennessee, I should say.
I was going to say, Memphis is kind of a small, forgotten western town in the state.
My point is that when it comes to the Warriors, there's so many moving parts. Like, you can't just simply say, this is who they are, this is where they're going, this is what they need. We sit here, and week after week, we buy in sometimes to Klay Thompson, to Andrew Wiggins. We begin to think, just when you're ready to kick dirt on that foundational, the older core, that they still have something left in the tank. They've still got a year or two left. Just when you're ready to blow it up, they win 3 in a row on the road.
Yep.
And they hold three teams, 3 consecutive nights or 3 consecutive games. They hold teams and opponents to under 100 points defensively. So just when you're ready to buy in, they get slapped in the face again, and they potentially could lose to San Antonio. So is the team too young? Do they need to get young? Are they too old? Or do you keep the pieces? Timelines? I'm telling you, you don't deal with this with any other team in the NBA except that of the Golden State Warriors.
This is from the Comcast Business text line for the 415. You guys should try being a Clippers fan for the last 30 years. That's a pretty good
Boom.
one. But that's just, mired in mediocrity. We're talking about this season. Like, it's funny. We're looking at inconsistent teams around the NBA. Warriors got to be at the top of a lot of people's lists. I think Sacramento's probably up there. They've been up and down. Maybe the Lakers. Phoenix, I would say, has been pretty disappointing. Milwaukee, maybe, though they've been good, has been up and down. It is interesting, though, Dan.
Oh, wait, can I just throw out a stat? Because you and I think, are on the same level when it comes to Doc Rivers getting dusted off in another opportunity.
Yes, yeah.
He's 14-13 as a head coach of Milwaukee. Meanwhile, his predecessor, I believe, was, I want to say,
Mr. Griffin
was 31-13. That may not be right.
No, I think you are. I think you are.
It's like 31-13, and Doc has been 14-13 since his arrival. Anyways, go ahead.
No, he's basically just kept the team afloat. But it's interesting that the teams, excluding Sac, but all right, Golden State, Los Angeles, even Milwaukee, the Clippers, shout out our guy in the 415, and Phoenix would be the other team. You know what all of those teams got in common?
What's up?
They're old. They're really old. Like, the average age of all 5 of those teams is what you'd find in the top 5 of the NBA. Milwaukee's the oldest team in basketball. The Warriors, I think, are the 4th or 5th oldest team in basketball. The Lakers are old. All the best players, Phoenix, the best players, 35, 36, KD, they're all old. And we're at the point now in the season where we're seeing a couple of them fade a little bit. Phoenix has fallen into the play-in tournament. Milwaukee is still at the top of the East by process of elimination, but to your point, they haven't been very good since Rivers took over for them. The Warriors, in my opinion, have to find a way not to completely rebuild, but to get younger this summer. Now, that's going to include keeping Kuminga and hopefully more of a role for someone like Moody, Trace Jackson-Davis, Pajemski. I think those guys have shown that they can help, and they've been necessary for the place that they're in, but they have to find a way to get younger at the top. Like, the hierarchy has to me, Steph at age 37, it would be unfair to expect him to carry this team like he did and has done next season when he's another year older. Klay Thompson, and me, I think he actually has improved his market value throughout the year because he's shown that he's willing to accept a lesser role, but also now even stepping back into the starting lineup means to me the agenda or the, I guess, sensitivity surrounding Klay Thompson and where he's at with his basketball career and life, that's no longer as big of a question. And I think that was the biggest thing for me, is how sensitive or emotional is Klay going to be if he doesn't feel like he's the same player? To me, he's answered that question a bit. And so I think his value has risen. But does he fit with the Warriors at a particular number? Is there another team out there that could use the services of Klay Thompson? And then Draymond Green. I don't think he's changed a lick, but he's got to look himself in the mirror, because if he's suspended for another 25 games, or if he is unavailable for this team, who knows? Next year, maybe it's not suspensions. Maybe he doesn't get ejected one time next year. But you know what? That lower back problem that flared up in the championship title run season comes back to bite him again. Then you're down 20 games of Draymond. There are too many questions about the availability and production of players at the top of the hierarchy for the Warriors, for me, that I feel like they need to address the average age of this team. And part of that's going to be Chris Paul, I think, moving on. But in general, you just need players that you can know what to expect from. And that hasn't happened.
You need a star. And I said this at the beginning of the show, and we talked about, or at least I mentioned, quote unquote, blowing it up. Think about, how's this for an analogy, Ev? I mentioned this last week. LeBron James. Say what you will about LeBron. I'm not a LeBron guy, but I recognize his greatness. And I certainly understand how smart he is, not only as a basketball player, but also as a businessman.
You were listening to his new podcast? Is that what you're talking about?
It's pretty insightful. You know, the only problem I have with his new podcast and JJ Redick.
I was going to say, is JJ Redick?
Well, JJ Redick. But they almost have this sort of edict that's been handed down from Adam Silver that I need you guys to use this sort of the lexicon and the terminology of basketball. Like, I need you guys to use that so that it becomes part of, part of the dialogue of fans when they're talking about the NBA, much like that of the NFL, much like that of Major League Baseball. That has to be very organic. To hear LeBron James and JJ Redick just sort of force feed people talking about, well, I was at the nail coming off the double pin down. Like, it's just like you're trying to fit something in there that's just not, like, you have an agenda here. In the NFL, you don't hear Patrick Mahomes get into this, well, we scraped and I found the hot receiver on the right. Nah, it's like a lot of that stuff we know about a guy setting the edge. We know about two deep zones just because as a casual fan you do. And I think that from a marketing standpoint, that's what LeBron James and JJ Redick are trying. Aren't you glad you asked me about this podcast?
Yeah.
I'm trying to just jam down your throat. So anyways, what the hell is I talking about?
No. If I can digress for a moment, I see a D in DC. I see a Connor in Dublin. The number is 888-957-9570. I swear to God, Dan Devone and I are talking about the Golden State Warriors.
Let's get calls.
Well, but before, the thing about their podcast to me, it's kind of like Tony Romo. When Tony Romo got into the booth, he was the brand shiny new toy because he was talking about terms that no one had ever heard before, or he was calling out plays, and he was exuberant, and he was fresh, and he was new. And I'm kind of done with him at this point. I mean, I just feel like it's going to wear off. No one wants to have a dictionary term explained to them every single episode for 45 minutes. And as smart as LeBron is, I think that will fizzle as well. All right, D's out in D.C. What's going on, my man? How we doing back east? You're on with Evan and Dan.
What's going on? My two favorite people, man. How y'all doing?
What up, D?
Fantastic.
Hey, the problem with the Warriors, you guys already know who it is, man. It's the one who is the biggest coconut on the roster. He's all that is wrong. He's all that is wrong with the Warriors. Too small, too short, too old, too inconsistent, too volatile, too everything, right? If you want to moving forward, like by next season, if you don't trade Draymond Green, if you don't get rid of Draymond Green, you're not making any changes, period. I don't care who else you bring in. Draymond will continue to be who he's always been. Unfortunately, right now he's getting older, and his lack of ability to do, he's already limited offensively. His inability to affect the game the way he used to affect it back in the days are gone. Now he's going to rely a hell of a lot more upon his craziness to try to get himself going. And that's going to get us in trouble, and it's going to get him in trouble. So as a result, moving forward, Laker needs to remove the clutch shackles he has around his feet and get rid of Draymond to get this team better. That's all I got, man.
Thanks, DC. Clutch with a K, by the way, Dan.
Oh, I got you.
Shout out Rich Paul. Yeah, I mean, like I think there's a lot more of that. And thank you, D and DC. There's a lot more of that sentiment that we've heard from the fan base than ever before because of what happened on Wednesday. Now, this might have been building for some time with a certain section, But we're taking calls all week on 95.7 The Game, and I got to tell you, the Draymond defenders, the Draymond apologists, their voices were not as loud as they usually are.
Well, it's because the team isn't as good. And I think, was it louder when he punched Jordan Poole? Probably not. I guess my point is that you can set your watch to this stuff. And if you sign up for Draymond Green, even if you trade him, whoever it is that's trading for Draymond, this is what you're going to get. It's baked in. So none of it should be surprised at this point. Like, I'm over it. I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. He did something completely irrational, but that's who this cat is. And that's what it is. That's what you signed up. This is who it is that you have at your center spot. The only way that he gets moved, it's not, to me, everything that he does with this ridiculous maniacal behavior of getting bounced from a game that's 4 minutes in and a game that you need to have, probably their most important game on the season, just a stupid move. That has nothing to do with it. I think it comes down to, is he still a good basketball player? Now, he clearly hasn't built up any equity, where there's some players that, you could slow a half step, but because you're such a positive attitude in the locker room, or because you're such a good team guy, or because we value you as a person, we're gonna hang on to you a few more years. The minute he slows a bit, bro, we're not keeping you anymore, because if you can't help us on the basketball court, you can't justify all the other crap that we've had to deal with. See you later. But I still think that if Jokic is coming to town, who's going to D him up? I mean, when you think about, running the show as a point guard at times, he's still effective. Like, that's the prism by which everybody, including Lacob and Dunleavy and Kerr, they measure this guy. And they recognize everything else. Yes, it's sort of baked in. We accept it. It makes no sense. But that's how the justification for keeping this guy going forward is all predicated on what it is that he does on the floor and nothing else, in my estimation. And I know I'm sort of on an island there.
No, I don't think you are. But I also think that what he does on the floor is being overshadowed by what he also does outside of the game. I mean, he's been ejected 4 times this season, Dan. He's been suspended or has missed due to injury or suspension about 25 games. That's not insignificant. He has been unavailable largely because of his own actions for a third of the year. And if he is the same important, emotional, integral player, cerebral player that the Warriors need, well, that's kind of a problem. And the problem is that you're right. This is on a clock. I mean, just twice a day. Dead clock is right twice a day. Well, for Draymond Green, the clock is apparently wrong 4 times a year. That can't happen. And he said repeatedly, these things can't happen. And yet they continue to. The quote of the season so far has been Stephen Curry saying the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over again, expecting different results. I think that applies to Draymond. And at some point, you got to figure out when you want to cut bait with that level of insanity. Because you're right, he's still a good player. But if he can't help you, and if he's also becoming more of a negative influence because of his actions, well, then we got problems. He punched a teammate, derailed that season. If there was a laundry list of reasons the Warriors have not achieved their goal, I don't know if Draymond's number 1, but he's probably 1A this year because of how much time he's missed because of either choking a player or backspinning a fist into Yusuf Nurkic's face or flailing and almost kicking Grant Williams last night. Like, this stuff is not going away. And so unless he's able to look himself in the mirror and actually go to therapy and, allegedly.
It ain't happening.
Exactly. But that's kind of the point, Dan. I'm also, it was on full display on Wednesday again, but the difference was we saw Curry just be emotionally spent. He had it up to here. And it was not just that one night. I think it was an accumulation of everything. Dude, you've got to be kidding me. And they're going to ride out on Sunday. I mean, he was out there last night. They won a game by 20 going away. Curry was good. Draymond was fine. But there's residue there, Dan. And I don't know if we can just look past that the way we've continued to look past Draymond.
But I think everything is going to be done just, again, within the spectrum of basketball moves. So if you want to move off on Draymond, again, it just gets back to, what am I getting in return? It's all about making the Golden State Warriors better, unless you and Dub Nation are saying, just let them walk. Let them go. We can't deal with this anymore. Just get them, for a bag of chips. Like, I don't think that all of this is done through, again, the lens of what makes the Warriors better. And right now, on the floor, you can look at it on games he plays and when he was suspended, as you referred to. They're not as good of a basketball team. That's what this all boils down to. I guess if what people are saying, I'm tired of him, get him out the door, if you expect Dunleavy to say, so long, Draymond, we're gonna move you. We're not gonna get much in return. We just need you to go away, simply because of all of the extracurricular nonsense is too disruptive. We've gotten to the point where no more, no mas, as Roberto Duran once said to Sugar Ray Leonard, no mas, we're done with you. Or is Dunleavy gonna say, okay, we're gonna trade you because I'm getting something back in return? Or we're going to move you because you're going to be part of a deal that's going to make my team better. That's all I'm saying, that these decisions are made exclusively on how do we get better as a basketball team. It's not about, okay, the behavior's gotten to the point where it's just, Draymond, I tell you what, take your money and go. We'll pay you, in perpetuity for the next, 3 years of the rest of your life. Like, everything is done, again, through the prism of, how do the Warriors get better as a basketball team? If that means trading Draymond, let's do it.
I think that one of the biggest issues, if I can jump in here real quick, one of the biggest issues is his justification for what his actions have proven. Like on his podcast, the Draymond Green Show, shout out his podcast, whatever. But he goes, if I'm being honest with y'all, I was kind of trying to turn my body and angle it to go to the bench. But I said what I said a little too soon before angling my body. So what he's basically saying is I should have moved before talking to the ref. I should have moved out of the way of what I was saying. It's like, no, just don't talk. Don't say anything. That's what you should have done. Hold your tongue.
Well, that's what a normal person would do.
Right.
No, and that, by the way, is our guy Killer Ken behind the glass. It sounded like a kid that got caught at a candy store stealing Skittles and is not remorseful for stealing the candy, but is remorseful for getting caught. And that's who Draymond Green has shown himself to be. I don't think he's a bad person, but the guy's got issues.
Oh, he's got issues.
He's got impulse control issues.
No doubt. He deals with rage, and that's why when people are like, how can you do that 4 minutes in? Well, when you get enraged, you've lost control of everything. The one thing that I did want to mention, and when I saw this in real time, Ev, you know what jumped out at me? It wasn't necessarily Steph Curry or Chris Paul. After he gets rung up, he gets the first technical, right? And now he's still jawing at the referee. You're 4 minutes in. It's a game you need. I don't know that I can put this on Steve Kerr, that I think about it and let this, this thing has been able to sort of settle a little bit. But somebody needed to get in there and say, let's go, that's enough, and get his ass back to the bench. Allowing him to sit there and go, verbal dart for verbal dart with the referee when you got one technical and you can't lose him. Well, what the hell did you expect to happen? That, to me, screamed that the adult in the room has to step between Draymond and the referee. Now, Steph did it to a certain degree. Chris Paul was there, but that was clear that somebody needed to say, enough, bro. Let's get you back to, let's just live to see another play. The fact that he was allowed to just sit there and do what it is that he did, that to me was an inevitability that he was going to get tossed.
But Curry did try to stop him. Like, if you watch it, if you go back and watch, he's next to him after he picks up the technical, and he's saying, come on, let's go. What, he's going to take a grown man and, like, physically move him away from the referee? No, that's on Draymond Green. And all of these suspensions and ejections and games missed by this year have been on Draymond Green. And I do think on the YouTube chat, powered by First NorCal Credit Union, Golden State Warriors Vera brings up, I think, the rat on the table, brought to you by Echo Pest Control, is you can't replace a player like Draymond.
Sponsor for that.
Yeah.
Boy, Guru.
There we go.
Shout out, Goo.
But that question has become more of a debate than ever before. Is Draymond replaceable? Well, the 12 games he was suspended indefinitely, Dan, they went 7-5. Overall this year, they're a sub-500 team with him off the court, 11-14. But he is more replaceable than he's ever been. Is he still a very good basketball player? Yes. So is Steph Curry. So is Klay Thompson. Draymond is the core of their defense right now, but they've also been able to operate without him at times this year. And that begs the question of, is Draymond Green still irreplaceable? I've thought about that long and hard. And on Wednesday, it might have been prisoner of the moment, Dan, but looking at Curry's face and looking at the way that the Warriors rallied, I mean, they went on like a 17-3 run after the ejection. I mean, it was like they said, you know what? Forget him. We don't need this guy. Because this is a game that, regardless of how Draymond acts or plays or otherwise, this is a game we need, and he didn't want to be out there. He got tossed 4 minutes into a basketball game. That's ridiculous.
Well, really quick, was Curry obviously, he's frustrated. Was he frustrated with Draymond, which is sort of like the easy, yeah, that makes sense? Or, let me just throw this out there. Was the frustration part of what it is that Coach Kerr has been talking about, that this dude's logged a lot of minutes. He's been carrying us for a lot of years. It's towards the end of the season, and he's 36 years of age, and now he doesn't have Draymond. The dude is tired. He's frustrated. He can't take any load management like other stars towards the end of the season, right? Getting ready for the postseason. You can't afford to rest this guy if you want to hold off the Houston Rockets. Was part of that of the equation like, you know what, man, I'm so tired physically, and now I'm without Draymond. This is just me voicing my level of frustration that I'm exhausted as a basketball player, and now to compound things with this coconut.
It's ridiculous, man. And there is something else that I felt about on Wednesday, and I still feel right now, 72 hours later, about that I want to get to on the other side in regards to the big three, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green. One doesn't have a contract of the three, but I do think that Wednesday, it opened my eyes to something. I want to reveal that on the other side. I also see you, Connor, in Dublin. I apologize. We will get to you on the other side. That's Dan DeVoe and Evan Giddings with you on Warriors This Week. Halfway home up until 12 o'clock on your home for Golden State Warriors basketball on 95.7 The Game.
O'Reilly. Protect your vehicle's engine with Syntec.
Now back to Warriors This Week on 95.7 The Game.
All right, halfway home here on Warriors This Week. Dan Devone, Evan Giddings with you on 95.7 The Game every Saturday morning, 9 to noon, talking Dubs. Warriors right now 5 games above 500, a season high for them. They are the 10 seed, game and a half back of the Lakers, game up on the Houston Rockets, who just continue to win, Dan. They just continue to win games. 11 in a row after a 1-point win in Utah last night.
Isn't that crazy? They can't keep that up, though, right?
Well, I didn't think they'd win 5 in a row. Nevertheless, 11.
You think this thing will come down to that matchup between the Warriors and the Rockets next week?
It might. It's so funny. We thought, a couple weeks ago was that matchup between the Warriors and the Lakers, and the Warriors won in LA, and it was huge. And all right, so that means they got the upper hand for the elimination game. And now it's like, damn, we're looking at that game on Thursday against Houston, circling it like that. That might be for all the chips. I mean, it's a reflection of the state of the season, I think.
Well, and also, I think you have to keep in mind when you think about the scheduling, doesn't do the Warriors any favors because they got that makeup game, remember, against the Dallas Mavericks, I want to say.
Yep,
so you're crisscrossing the country. And so you're looking for every advantage. And I've talked about how this is an older team. That does not work in their favor.
No, it doesn't. I think to end the season, they will have played 17 games in 30 days. I mean, they got 5 games in 7 days. As of last week, it's going to be the same. And you might have had a condensed road schedule, but because this game was not supposed to happen and was unfortunately had to be moved because of Dejan Milojevic's passing in January, because of that, basically you're in a position where you're not going to get those 3 days off you were supposed to get, and you got to roll right into Sunday and then Tuesday and then a back-to-back Thursday, Friday. So you're basically playing the same amount of games that they played this past week once more, and then you're just rolling it on to the next week.
Which is why, if ever there was a season where they needed depth, in which they have this year, this is it. And I think that you talk about the back-to-back and how they were so good, not so good, but they were able to gut out that win against Orlando. To me, that is exactly what it is that we're talking about. Chris Paul had no legs. He couldn't even bring the ball up the court. I saw at least one pick six by Cole Anthony on him. Like, he had no handle against Cole Anthony. And
he got picked against Miami, too.
That's what happens when you get older. You just don't have your legs, man. So that's when the youth, and that's when you can go deep. We talked about how problematic it was early on in the season. How you going to juggle 12 guys? We got to get all 12 guys run. You got to go, this team's at least 11 guys deep. Well, right now, as you get deep into the season and you're dealing with some injuries, you need every one of those bodies.
You do. Let's get out to Connor in Dublin here on Warriors This Week. Dan Devone, Evan Giddings, 95.7 The Game. Connor, thanks for hanging on. How we doing?
Doing great. How are you guys doing?
Awesome, my man. Thanks for calling in. What do you got?
Yeah, no, without a doubt. Hey, you don't need to apologize for not getting to me because listening to you guys, you guys have opened up my mind and have allowed me to look at this in a way that I've never really looked at it before, in a more philosophical way and less about the game, in a sense that I don't really apply the definition of insanity as repeating the same mistake or repeating the same thing, expecting a different outcome. I more look at it as the life that a person who is a fool and who's doomed to repeat them, that's the kind of life they're living. They're living a life of insanity. And that's the thing that's going on with Draymond, is he's a fool. He's that fool who is doomed to repeat his mistakes, and he's not learning from them. And until he gets smart enough to learn from them, he never will. And so he's ultimately living that life of insanity, and it's going to be hard for him because, and the way you can tell about whether or not you think he's worth anything or not is my way of looking at it is he more of a help than a hindrance? If he's more a hindrance than a help, then I say it's about time to probably trade him for a quality player. And that's the thing. If teams know about Draymond already, they know how much impulsivity he has, and how lack of self-control he has on the court, and so would teams be even willing to take this guy? And that's a concern. And I'm gonna think. I thought up of an analogy for the Warriors team right now. The Warriors team are like that sandcastle you build too close to the water, and it looks real nice, and then that wave comes and washes it away, and then you rebuild it and it gets washed away. And that's what I'm looking at right now. Like, the Warriors look good, then they get washed away. And then and it's just that over and over process until they just fall apart, and then you got to leave the beach, and then it's gone.
Thanks, Connor. Yeah, I don't know if there's any beaches in Dublin, but we're running into that in Ocean Beach. I can tell you what.
You're not building sandcastles in Ocean Beach.
He's opening my mind, Dan.
Yeah, that was a nice analogy there, Mr. Connor. Someone said Draymond trade him for a Ben Simmons expiring contract to dump him. I'm assuming that's tongue-in-cheek. I think if you're going to move off of Draymond, I'll just reiterate what I said in the last block, is that all of this is done through the lens of what makes basketball sense for your team. And again, the thing is that I'll tell you how this is going to play out. It's going to dissipate with every game. We'll talk less and less about Draymond. He'll do some good things, and we won't forget about it entirely until the next uprising, which will happen. And that's life with Draymond Green. Just deal with it. I mean, the idea that it's the end of the world because Draymond was so selfish, and it's just who he is until you trade him and you don't have to deal with him anymore. And if you're going to trade him, then what is it that you're getting in return? Because that's how Dunleavy lives his life the minute he gets up till he goes to bed at night. Unless you're saying, I am so tired of this guy, let him walk. It's like, I don't care what we get in return. It's gotten to the point of no return.
There are levels of importance in the organization, and Draymond's pretty high. I mean, that's why they brought him back for 4 years at $100 million. But Mike Dunleavy Jr. has already showed us once that he's willing to move off of a player that they just inked to a big deal. And he told us Jordan Poole would be here for 4 more years, and he traded him 2 weeks later. Jordan Poole's not Draymond Green. Has never been, will never be. But I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility for Mike Dunleavy Jr. to make another difficult choice this season, or this upcoming offseason, if it's determined that the toxicity that Draymond has brought is too much. Again, if the juice is not worth the squeeze. And I've been thinking about it a lot. And the image in my head, Dan, from Wednesday is just Curry. It's just Curry. I mean, that's the franchise. Like, he's the sun. Everything revolves around Steph. And Draymond messed with 30, man. He just did. He extracted an emotional outpour that we've never seen before from Curry. We talked about it earlier this week. Curry doesn't kick chairs unless he's frustrated, which he did at the end of the Orlando game. He is not brought nearly to tears unless this is something that's been building over a long period of time. And while I do think that Draymond's probably still on the team next year because I think he can still help them, I'm to the point where I think I'd rather have Klay Thompson on this team moving forward than Draymond Green. That's the level of toxicity that I've seen this year, him missing 25 games largely because of his own actions, bringing Curry to the brink of tears. Klay Thompson doesn't have a deal. I would rather have him in a Warriors uniform beyond this season than Draymond at this point.
Well, I think he's sort of shooting his way back to sort of the being in the good graces of the people that, will determine his fate. Because you need shooters in this league. And even if he's limited, if his role continues to get more mitigated, as long as he can come in and shoot well, he still becomes somebody that can, again, you only look at this as to whether he can help your team. I think his days as a starter, I think on a good basketball team, that's not where you're going. I think his numbers should be limited, but he still should be part of your future when you're talking about Klay Thompson. What it boils down to him is just how much money you can ask for. I don't know that I can go more than, $24 million a year, or maybe that number's come down a bit. You're certainly not worth the 43 we're giving you right now, and you may not be worth the 25. It just becomes a numbers game when it comes to Klay Thompson. Really quick though, just to revisit Steph Curry and Draymond Green. Mm-hmm. Now, are you saying that was that just a frustrated moment in time for that of Steph Curry? Or are you telling me that this bond between the two, which is, certainly that's been well documented, that's been fractured.
I don't think it's been completely severed, and he would never publicly say that. That's also just not Steph. But there was something in that moment where it's just like he's never reacted like that to one of the vets, whether it was Kevin Durant or Sean Livingston or David West or Andrew Bogut back in the day. We've never seen Steph react that way on the court to one of his brothers. Never. And it just looked like a guy who couldn't control himself. Like he spoke volumes to me without saying a word. And I don't know if the relationship I don't think it's severed. And Steph's a pro and they'll play well together and all the rest, but that's a moment in time that's going to stick with me, especially if things happen this summer in regards to changing big parts. Big changes. I think we're on the same page about this. And 888-957-9570 is the number here on Warriors this week. I think we both believe there needs to be big changes this summer. The big changes before Wednesday, to me, didn't necessarily include Draymond Green. After Wednesday and seeing Curry's reaction and then hearing Draymond's non-reaction, he's now on the table to me in regards to big changes this summer. That's where I'm at.
Let me give you another scenario. And you know what's interesting about Draymond is that you almost get this sense, and I mentioned this to you at the break, that he doesn't feel somebody has the gonads to throw him out of a game. Because he gets that first technical, and he's done this repeatedly, because I don't think refs want to be that guy to toss Draymond 4 minutes in, but you leave them, with no other alternatives. But Draymond almost acts with this sort of like this level of he's sort of pompous to the point of, you're not going to toss me. I'll continue to bark.
Like, I dare you.
Yeah, exactly. And I almost feel like that when it comes to trading him. Like, he almost feels as though, you could trade me. I'm Draymond Green. I get that sense. But let me give you another scenario when it comes to Steph and Draymond. So I believe Steph is consulted with trades. I think that at least Myers, maybe it's not true with Dunleavy. They at least to the point of like, we're thinking of doing
this. They let him know, yeah.
When it comes to Draymond, they give him a phone call and they're like, listen, we're thinking of moving Draymond. Do we have your blessings? What is it that Steph says?
I think if there's a move that the Warriors could sell Steph, if it helps you get better.
Because that was off the table a couple of years ago.
I agree. I don't think it's the same conversation anymore. Yeah. Even this last offseason, I think they said, hey, Steph, we're going to have to get rid of Draymond or Poole. Like, they can't play together. You saw what happened last season. We can't bring that back. I'm not asking you to pick one, but if we moved one of them, would you be okay with it? I think Steph would be more inclined to say, well, we probably need Draymond more. This summer, I think if Dunleavy called him up and said, hey, 30, we got a deal on the table for Draymond. I think it can help us. It'll free up some runway. Kuminga's going to get more minutes at the 4. Trace Jackson-Davis is going to be our 5. We're going to figure out how to piece this together. We're going to put some more shooters around you. Get some two-way guys in here. What do you think? He'd go, I think he'd say, do what you got to do. I mean, I don't think that he is as Draymond Green is as irreplaceable as he was even one season ago. A lot has changed in 1 year. Hell, a lot's changed in 1 week. And that's one of the reasons why I love doing the show with you. It's like every time we think we're going to find ourselves in a rut or, I don't know, content hell, the gift that keeps on giving are the Golden State Warriors.
It's nuts.
888-957-9570 is the number. That's Dan Devone, Evan Giddings with you. Skills in Vallejo. What's going on, Skills? You're on 95.7 The Game. How are you?
Hey, what's up? Good morning, Dan. Good morning, Evan. Good to be on with you. I want to just reference a couple things you guys said earlier, like during the first hour of the show, and I'll start with Mike Dunleavy. Dan, you made a reference to Mike Dunleavy possibly blowing the team up this offseason. And, when he played, he was part of the Warriors team who was, you remember in 2007, he was part of that trade that with Indiana blowing that team up. And what happened? He saw from Indiana, the Warriors became a very much improved team for the next year and a half until other stuff happened, which messed that up, but that's another story. Point is, he's brought in, he can't be too connected to these guys. That's the whole reason why he's here. Well, they have to replace Myers, of course, but Dunleavy, he can't be tied into this, everyone who won in the past. If he lets Klay Thompson go, though, hopefully he does so in a more classy way than Farhan Zaidi did with Brandon Crawford. Now, my second point real quick is just that Steph was upset the other night on the court against Orlando because of this. He realized in that moment that Draymond is not going to change. He can't change. I don't think he's capable of change. I wrote Draymond off years ago when he got ejected against Charlotte, got those 2 technicals late, cost the Warriors a game. And I think Curry in that moment realized he's stuck with 2 star players, quote-unquote star players, in Green and Wiggins, who, Wiggins has been better lately. You cannot count on them for any given night. You never know what you're going to get from any given night. You never know if they're going to be there, be available to play with you on any given night. And you guys alluded to this. Steph has been killing himself, trying hard at 36 years old, trying to keep this team afloat. And he realized that this window possibly could be shut. He's stuck with these 2 guys. You guys, I think, Evan, you said earlier, 3 more years on each of their contracts. He's going to probably finish his career in this kind of rut, in this mediocrity with the wheel spinning for the Warriors. I hope I'm wrong, but that's probably what it is. So I'll let you guys go with that. Thank you.
Thanks, Gills. Great call, man. Appreciate it. Yeah, I think Curry is looking around at this team and saying, what do I want the rest of my career to be? It was funny. Someone, I think it was a Hornets media member, but someone in Charlotte last night asked him if he'd ever thought about, playing in Charlotte. And he kind of lingered there for a second and was gathering his thoughts. And it's like, no, I'm a Warrior for life. I want to be here. Love the Dubs. As the thought crossed my mind, yeah, like anything else, right? You wonder what it would be like to play in front of your hometown team. I think there's thoughts that are rattling around Curry's head, and this summer there's going to be a lot of them about what he wants over the next just 2 years, right? That's till the end of his contract. I think he wants to be here, and I think the Warriors will do everything they can under the sun to keep him here. But if that means moving on from one of those 2 pieces, I'm not just saying it is Draymond. It could be Wiggins. Maybe Steph is tired of not knowing which Wiggins is going to show up even on a given night. But I think there's a lot of thoughts rattling around Curry's head that involve really hard choices. And I don't think he's going to be a guy that's going to put the kibosh on any of them if you can sell him on it.
I was referring to making the analogy between him and LeBron James earlier, and this is where I wanted to go. Why LeBron James he's good at being sort of this player / GM because he's really callous and he's smart. And so when he was about Steph Curry's age, right, he's with the Lakers. And basically he said, Rob Pelinka in your $5,000 suit, get in here. All these kids that you got, KCP, Lonzo Ball, Julius Randle, D. Russ, get them the hell out of here. I need a star. All right, I need a star. I'm 37 years of age, and what I'm telling you and the rest of the NBA is that I cannot do it to the level that I once did. I can still be one of the best players in the NBA. I can still dominate at times, but at this age, 36, 37 years of age, I'm telling everybody publicly that I need help. Who was the best player available at the time? It was Anthony Davis. Now, say what you will about the quote-unquote asterisk bubble NBA championship, but it was a championship nevertheless.
Yep.
And I think that's where Steph's at. Steph's at a similar point where it's like, let's stop this. Go get me a star. He won't ever do this because it's not within his personality, but they're very similar at similar stages of their career, where LeBron James just said, ship everyone out and get me a star player in return. And that's where I think Steph Curry, if he's going to win another title, you cannot play this game of Andrew Wiggins, peekaboo, I'm here today, gone tomorrow. Who the hell is, let's play the old, it's time now to play everyone's favorite game show. Which Klay Thompson will show up tonight? This has gone on and on. Steph Curry needs someone, once again, that is stamped on the forehead, 25-10 every night. Let's go make a run at another title. Sprinkle in the Pajemskis, the Trace Jackson Davis. Hopefully he can hang on to Kuminga. You may not be able to, Ev. You may have to say goodbye to Jonathan Kuminga, because I don't know that those aging players, including Draymond Green, are going to bring you back whoever the Anthony Davis is that might be available this offseason. But that's what you're looking at if you want to be relevant again.
Well, that's why I do think Kuminga is probably high up on the trade list. Like if they're going to make a move, if they're actually going to improve and go out and get someone, Kuminga, he almost has to be involved. I mean, if you're another team looking at the Warriors roster, God love Pajemski and TJD and Moses Moody and all the rest. There's nobody on that team young outside of Kuminga that's worth much, if anything. So he's also the guy that I wouldn't want to move. Like if you're looking at untouchables, I don't think anybody is untouchable outside of Steph this summer. But the second player to me I cannot get off of, I cannot move off of, is Kuminga. And do I think he's a perfect player? No. Have they even really missed him the last 2 games? You can make a case that they haven't, because Wiggins, without Kuminga on the floor, has been doing Wiggins things. When Kuminga returns to the lineup with knee tendon after going, his little knee tendonitis, if he returns to the lineup tomorrow in San Antonio, do they just figure things out? Perhaps. Maybe he gets back to being a consistent offensive force. I think there's a lot of growth that Kuminga can still make between now and next year. But that is also why I feel like the path to a star is so difficult for the Warriors, because the only guy that would be able to fetch you one is also the same person you kind of can't give up on, in my opinion.
But you got to give something to get something in return.
And that's why I don't know if they do get a big boy this summer. I mean, unless you're telling me Giannis is on the table, I'm not moving Kuminga.
Yeah, it depends on what's available. I'm with you there.
Like, I didn't want Pascal Siakam, and he came in and gave the Warriors 29-16 the other night. So I think that level of star, if you're talking about, Siakam's not a star, but he's a serviceable, he's a good player. I think that's the level of player you're looking at this summer.
And you're giving up draft picks as well, which is another thing that I didn't mention. When you're talking about these younger teams in the West, they also got a lot of... OKC's has got boatloads of picks as well. So they're going to get even better. As it relates to Jonathan Kuminga, he is ascending, I think we'd all agree. And we get excited about his age and the fact that the dude's 21. Where's he going to be 5 years from now when he's still not even at the apex of his career? So that's very enticing. But he's not there yet now. So a lot of what it is that you see with the Golden State Warriors is conjecture. Like, we think he's a rising star, but he's not a star. Giannis and some of the top-tier players are established stars in this league. That's who they need to get. Not somebody who has the potential, not somebody who's, quote-unquote, a bit of a project, but somebody that is already, again, stamped as an NBA superstar in this league. A perennial NBA all-star basketball player is what you need. Jonathan Kuminga is not that. Not yet. Could be, but he's not there yet. Same thing with Pajemski. A lot of it is potential. Trayce Jackson-Davis, as good as he is, you still have to hold your breath a little bit and let this breathe over the course of a couple of years when you can say, oh yeah, Trayce Jackson-Davis is this guy. Jonathan Kuminga is a perennial all-star, but we're not there yet. And so, again, a lot of this is, quote-unquote, the big P words, potential and promise. What the Warriors need is somebody who's established as being a guy that every night, along with Steph, is going to give you 25 and 10.
And that's what I want to use to kick off the final hour as we head to our commercial break here, heading into the 11 o'clock hour, 9 to noon. Warriors this week, 95-7 the game. 888-957-9570 is the number. What kind of player do you want to see on this team next year? Is it someone that's already on the team that's grown internally? Is it going out and using trade chips to fetch a big man, a wing? What kind of player can help Golden State kind of uncoil this season, really the last 2 seasons that have been mired largely in mediocrity? That's Dan Devone. Evan Giddings with you. Back after this on Warriors This Week on 95.7 The Game.
So, how's your research going?
Surprising. After I figured out the top-rated TVs in our price range, I went shopping for deals.
And who's the best?
Warriors This Week continues on 95.7 The Game.
All right, we got 1 hour left here on a gorgeous Saturday in the Bay. Dan Devone, Evan Giddings with you, 95.7 The Game. Dan's got a new pair of headphones, cans as we call them in the business. You hearing loud and clear, Dan? What's going on?
Man, you sound beautiful. You sound mellifluous. That's the word of the day. It's the word of the day there.
I know, maleficent.
Thank you.
Shout out to Angelina Jolie. Sorry, what?
Mellifluous.
What is that?
Mellifluous. Look it up. It's
it's a $20 word.
Yeah, this is the beginning of JJ Redick's podcast. He explains every term to you before he gets to.
So essentially, yeah, that's part of the problem there. That's what I'm talking about. They're trying too hard to be inside and give you the terminology and trying to sell that so that it creates this new fan base in basketball. It's a deliberate effort. I know this from a marketing standpoint. And Adam, mellifluous, it's sort of, so the root of the word is melody.
Mm-hmm.
So it's harmonious.
Mellifluous. I like that.
Yeah.
The Warriors have not been mellifluous throughout the entirety of the season, but over the last week, they have looked a little more like themselves. We're talking about what kind of player could come in and help this Warriors team. I mean, I think we're still all on the same page that no matter what the road records look like, they're 21-15. They get into a first-round series. Well, I guess we haven't talked about this, and I know it's getting further away, but like, what would the Warriors have to do in order for there not to be wholesale changes this summer?
Win the title?
Yeah, and I both think we're not on that page. I mean, a run to me would be to get out of the first round. I mean, honestly. Like, that would be a run. And I don't see one.
First round of the playoffs or the play-in?
Playoffs. Like, you got to get past the play-in, get to the playoffs, and then upset a team like you did last year against Sacramento. And even we saw then, running that back from last season and getting older by bringing in Chris Paul for Jordan Poole, put you in a position you are in now where you're basically in the same spot.
Yeah, what makes it challenging, once again, is the fact that by not being in the number 6 seed and having to be in that play-in game is that you don't get the week off. And for a team that's going to already be compromised towards the end of the season because they have to make up some games, this is a team that as they get into their mid to late 30s, that just does not have enough gas in the tank. And I think that's where this sort of begins and ends. That having to get through a play-in game, or if you win 2, and both of which could be on the road, then you got to take on potentially Denver or Minnesota and OKC. That's really, really challenging.
It is, man. And we're trying to figure out what player it could be. From the Comcast Business Text line 707, DeMar DeRozan. He's a little bit older, but he has been playing 37 minutes a night. I think he might be the league leader or one of the league leaders in minutes played this year.
Give me Kobe White instead of DeMar DeRozan.
I don't know if you can get Kobe White. Kobe White's pretty good. Jordan Clarkson from the 707. They might have a Jordan Clarkson on their team. His name's Klay Thompson. Next year, he's probably going to be the sixth man and shooter off the bench if he's still on the team, if they can come to a price. We need shooters in size, no stiff Euros like Šarić or Bjelica. Someone with athleticism. Bjelica wasn't bad for the Warriors, by the way.
No, he fit the role. Šarić did not.
No, he did not. And that's one of the reasons he still can't crack the rotation. God love him. This is from Jimbo on YouTube, powered by First NorCal Credit Union. And I think it's a fair question. 2 blown seasons. You think Joe Lacob was willing to gamble on a third? I don't.
No.
I do not think he's willing to gamble by bringing the majority of this team back at the price, even with Chris Paul probably being gone and getting under the second apron. I don't think he's looking at this team and saying this is good enough.
No, and how can you rationally look at this team logistically and say, okay, let's do this again? It's not as though Houston's not getting any better and, OKC's going to fall back to us. Those teams are only going to get better. Just take a look around. Again, the West is loaded, and they're loaded with young talent. And as much as you can say, okay, well, Phoenix is an older team, and yeah, I guess the Clippers are an older team, but Devin Booker ain't old. He's still in his 20s, and arguably he's
in his prime.
And the same thing, the Clippers, yeah, but George and Kawhi Leonard are barely 30. There's a difference between being 31 and 32 and 37 and 35. So, yeah, they're older teams, but not like that of the Golden State Warriors. And so I don't know how you can look around the room or you take that vacation on your yacht, Joe Lake, whatever it is that you do, and just breathe a little bit and say, okay, let me assess my team. Yeah, it makes sense to me to bring back the core because I have an allegiance to these guys and they're synonymous with titles. And let's do this dance again. Maybe I'll throw in, maybe you get a player or two. Maybe you get this year's version of Chris Paul next year, whoever that might be, not somebody that's really moving the needle. And I think, let's run it back. Let's do it again. There's no way in hell. These are smart people. Dunleavy, the minute the season's over, he's putting on the hard hat and he's climbing into that forklift or whatever it is that you have a wrecking ball and he's letting her rip. He's going to town. And he's not doing it just for the sake of Draymond, you bother me, or we've had too much. He's just making the team better and everybody's got to go. Everybody. And it gets back to what it is that I thought was Joe Lacob being a bit overreactionary, a bit emotional when he said, this is on the heels of them losing those 2 games to New Orleans and Toronto,
which they got
smoked at home.
Yeah.
And he said that, everybody is tradable except that of Steph Curry. I'm paraphrasing here, except Steph Curry. And I think that's sort of the mantra going forward.
I'm largely with you. I'm curious what people think at 888-957-9570. Let's talk to Big Smooth. Big Smooth, my man, what's going on? You're on Warriors This Week with Dan and Evan. How are you?
Hey, Big Smooth, before you go, hold on. Do you know who the original Big Smooth was in the NBA?
Sam Perkins, baby. He's
Hell yes!
And don't say Dwayne Kuiper. Don't hit me with the Kuiper. That's no.
Dwayne Kuiper.
It's me and Perkins.
Good job. Good stick, my man.
Me and Perkins.
Pride of North Carolina.
But listen, there's Warrior dub talk, and then there's realism, right? For example, you got to be a top 10 defense to win a chip. Let's face it. So you're going to take Draymond off, who's the best defender. Who's going to replace him that's going to make this a better defensive team? It's not just about chucking up threes. Even when the Warriors were winning chips, they were always top 10 defense. So, as we said, who's going to be that person? The Warriors traditionally don't sign big names other than Durant. It's been big pieces. So it's more complicated than what we're talking about. But I believe you definitely bring the 3 back because, again, whoever you add to this defense, and listen, the Warriors don't have a Draymond problem. They know who Draymond is. Heck, Steve Kerr just said last midseason, he says, we're not winning the chip without Draymond. And what they do? It wasn't even a long free agency. They signed him because they know they're not winning the chip because it takes defense to win championships. You're going to remove Draymond and replace him with who to make you a better defensive player? Who? Padinsky and Steve and Steph Curry? They're not defensive players. So as we keep talking about Draymond, and I get it, he needs to get himself under control. But who's going to play defense when he's gone? We're always, let's get Draymond out of here. Who's going to play defense? You're going to replace him with who? You're going to think Wiggins is going to be able to all of a sudden become Wiggins, two-way Wiggs, and that's not even enough. So I'm just saying, and the Warriors don't do big signings very well. I mean, I don't, again, other than Durant, who have they signed that was a big signing?
He's right when it comes to defense and when it comes to Draymond. It's like you only do that if it makes sense. Again, it's sort of what I said. He's still, as long as he's impactful on the floor, then you got to keep him. But if you can move him and upgrade, you'll do that. As far as the Warriors never getting a big piece, aside from that of Kevin Durant, well, they're a lot older now. And so assessing the team, back in the day, even as short as 3 to 5 years ago, it's not like that of assessing the team in 2024 because it's more evident now than ever before that they need that big piece. You could get by when you were in your late 20s and early 30s, but now that you're well on the wrong side of 30, I think it's clear to everybody that now more than ever, they need to land that so-called star.
I also want, kind of going back to Draymond, like I agree, he's the best defensive player on the team. And to his point, when they won the championship 2 years ago, they were middle of the pack offense. Like they were the number one defense in basketball throughout 82 games. That's why they won. They won through their defense because Wiggins was a ball star, point of attack defender, because Draymond was a great center fielder, because Curry was a little better defensively. Clay was a little better defensively. All around, they had a switchable lineup that also included guys like Otto Porter or Bielitsa. Gary Payton II, I think, was a better version of himself. They had guys that could lock up. The issue to me now is that the best defensive players either aren't available enough or are too inconsistent. So he's right. Like Draymond, when Draymond's been out there, especially beyond the month of February, they've been a top 5 defensive unit. Overall this season, they're 14th defensively. I don't know how they get better defensively, but I know overall this year they're not very good. Like they're not an elite defense if you look at what they put together throughout the entire season. It's the same conversation we have. I'll bring it to Klay Thompson. Klay Thompson's been really good since he's come off the bench, right? He's shooting north of 40% from three-point range. I think he's averaging more points in less minutes. He's been more efficient. He's shooting 38% from three for the entire year. So, yes, if we look at, micro samples throughout the season, there is evidence that would point to this player helping you or that player helping you or this guy being irreplaceable or this guy not being. But too many of those guys are at an advanced age or are not interested some nights in playing basketball, quite frankly, that your overall season is compromised. And what I've learned most this last 2-year stretch, Dan, is that actually the regular season does matter. It does matter because you give yourself a great path if you play quality basketball. The Warriors, outside of going 18-2 to start the championship year, I think they were like 5 or 10 games above 500, but they were the 3 seed on the backs of a 20-game stretch that they played. That means that they had to beat a depleted Denver team in the first round, that they could catch Minnesota in the Memphis. You know what I'm saying, though? Like now, in order to win the championship as a less than 4 seed, you're going to have to go through, because they're not going anywhere, Minnesota, OKC, Denver. You're probably going to have to beat 2 of those teams just to get to the NBA Finals in a 7-game series. That's a very daunting task. So if I'm looking at the Warriors and how to make their lives easier, yeah, I think in a game or in a series, Curry could take over a game. I don't know, maybe Klay could shoot you into a half and give yourself a chance. Like Wiggins might be able to take over a game. I don't know. But the point is, you can't even think about, we're talking about the play-in tournament because of what they've done in the regular season. If Draymond's not available, or if Klay's inconsistent, or Wiggins isn't high and low, then we don't even get a chance to talk about how they match up as a 3 or 4 seed. You know what I'm saying? Like the regular season matters. And I think a big reason why they've been up and down this last year, or had 44 wins last season, which got you to a 6, it's because either of age, attrition, or antics that they've not been able to string together consistent 82-game play.
Fair enough. So what's the answer, I guess, going forward?
The answer to me is to try and get younger. It is.
Younger with the personnel that they currently have as far as having larger roles. But I think if this gets back to they're either too close to the age of 40 or on the wrong side of 30 or too close to the age of 20. Like there's no one in the sweet spot except that of Kevon Looney and Andrew Wiggins.
There's no easy answer.
And those two guys are well detailed. So there really isn't. And that's just it. Like a lot of people just think that, okay, we'll do this or trade this guy. This is what we need to do. When you're talking about an aging dynasty, it's one of the most difficult things to keep that train going down the track, to continue to be relevant. And maybe you can point at San Antonio, and I'm including all major sports, where you can say that was a dynastic run and they continue to do it. Typically, these things don't end well. And the Warriors are not different in that conversation. So the idea of trying to Band-Aid or fix this thing, it's been seldom done. And as much as we hit our head up against the wall, when you're an aging core that has won titles, how do you exit this thing gracefully and as well as keep this team relevant as far as being synonymous with NBA titles and Western Conference championship appearances? Man, that's a hard thing to do.
And that's what they're trying to. Because they also don't really have a choice, right? I mean, this is all in front of them this season, but they don't have a pick. They'll get their first-round picks back beginning next season, and then maybe they might be able to do something with that. But all they can do is forge on this year and try and turn essentially water into wine. But I'm curious if people believe that there's a fix out there or a kind of fix that could help patchwork this franchise back together and most importantly, back to a place we all want them to be, which is in contention. 888-957-9570. That's Dan Devone. Evan Giddings with you. Warriors this week, 95.7 The Game. Let's go to Rich in Daly City. Rich, my man, what's going on? How are you today?
Good, guys. How are you?
Fantastic. What do you got?
Yeah, so, I sometimes disagree with you guys in terms of valuation, but, if I had to give up Kuminga and let's say Wiggins just to get someone of the level that you guys are talking about, the person that I would target would be Brandon Ingram. If I had to give up Kuminga and let's say Wiggins to make the money work, I'd ask for Ingram, Herb Jones, or Ingram and Jordan Hawkins. Let Clay and CP3 go, and then see about signing Nick Claxton so you get a younger, get defensive-minded players, and you get a superstar in Ingram that'll give you the 20 and 10 scoring averages that you were talking about to pair with Curry and the young guys that we have now. What do you guys think? I mean, because I look at Ingram as a kind of a redundant piece because they got Trey Murphy already, and they have, and they're probably looking to get some seasoned playoff bets. So I think it might be a good fit. I think with the dollars issue as well being resolved by doing that, we might be set for the future.
No, I appreciate that, Rich. I don't know if Ingram is the answer for me, Dan, but I think there's something there in the Warriors are going to have to get better by kind of buying around the margins. And I mean, it might be a player like Andrew Wiggins, like a reclamation project. Now, I don't think Ingram is the answer. He's not going to come in and lead your franchise, but he's a player that after 5 seasons in New Orleans, won All-Star appearance, has been to the playoffs, but hasn't really been a game changer. Maybe that's someone with a change of scenery.
He's been pretty good this year over the last 2 years. He's been sort of that.
He's a good scorer.
Quasi game changer, I think.
He's a good scorer.
Yeah.
But to me, I don't think he's impacted winning enough for me to say that, I think the reason for the New Orleans turnarounds this year is that Zion's been healthy.
Yeah.
So it might be a player like Brandon Ingram, some that you could go and get and say, hey, if we pair him with Curry or if we put him in our system, kind of like they did with Wiggins. Wiggins was a guy that was long and forgotten in Minnesota, and people wrote him off, and he came in and helped them win a championship. I think those are the kinds of players that they're looking and are going to be forced to identify.
I got one for you.
Okay.
Karl Anthony Towns. I don't think
that's out of
I don't think
bounds.
those two are going to stay together. I think one of them's got to go, and it ain't Ant-Man. He's not. Anthony Edwards he's Minnesota. It used to be Karl Anthony's talent. It used to be Cat's team. It's clearly all about the Ant-Man. That dude is just sick. I love that block he had a couple of weeks back where he rattled his head on the rim, and it was a huge block to save a game. I think that's interesting because I don't think that Karl Anthony Towns is sticking around Minnesota. A lot of it has to do with money, right? We talk about Joe Lacob, but Rudy Gobert is on a huge deal. They got to pay they got to pay their man, Anthony Edwards.
Yeah.
I think he could be available. I mean, what do you think?
No, I think he will be because you're right. His
max. What do you think of him coming here? But go ahead, talk about his deal.
No, I don't think that's out of the question at all. I mean, and if anything, if Draymond's around next year, playing alongside Draymond as the 4 or the 5, Cat stretches the floor. I mean, I don't think he puts them back into title contention, but I think he makes them significantly better. The only issue then you have to figure out would be money, because the reason why Minnesota would like to get off him is because his max deal, and he's making $55 million a year, begins next season.
Yeah.
So this year, I think he makes like 30, 35. But you're right. They're going to have to pay Gobert. They're trying to save money for Ant. I think this is an inflection point with Towns. And I think also the fact that he's been out and they've still been able to play and keep themselves in the 1 seed might also signal to the front office that we might be able to make this work without him. So, no, I don't. Look, Cat's a game changer. Whether people like him or not, is he a
weird dude?
Is he a one on a championship team? Probably not, but also that might be where he fits with the Warriors. Like, they wouldn't ask him to lead or carry the team the way that a number one usually has to.
Well, he solves a lot of problems immediately with his arrival if he came to the Golden State Warriors. Now suddenly you got a big. This team is just
a big in his prime.
I talked about this last week, that this idea of small ball with a team in their mid-30s is sort of just silly on its face. I think that you can play small like that. First of all, I think that's out. I think every team that's relevant in the NBA all have a big. The big has returned. Now, the big isn't like it was back in the 80s and the 90s when I was growing up, playing down on the dots, down on the post, and Patrick Ewing and David Robinson and Akeem Olajuwon. And then you double the post and you pass out of that, and that's how basketball was played. It was all played from, 18 feet and in. The game has changed, but the bigs have changed. For crying out loud, Karl Anthony Towns won a three-point shooting contest a couple of years back.
No, he takes like 8 a game. He's the self-proclaimed greatest three-point big man threat of all time.
But suddenly I'm getting way ahead of myself, but you think of a front line with him and Trayce Jackson-Davis potentially. Now suddenly you're big, but you're not Zach Edey big, where he has to live in the paint and can't go anywhere else. Sorry, man.
No, Zach Edey stinks. I'm sorry.
Big Maple, brother.
I can't stand him. It's also, this is an aside, any player that's in college for 4 years or more, they're there for a reason. You know what I'm saying?
TJD.
Yeah, and TJD could have came out, but the pandemic happened. So he was also a second-round pick, which is where Edey might be. I do like Trayce Jackson-Davis, though. Let's try and sneak in a call before we got to hit a break. Let's get to, I want to allow people the floor. Let's get to Steel Toe and San Mateo. Steel Toe, how we doing? You're on with Dan and Evan.
Hey, Dan and Evan. Thank you for taking my call. No free agents coming over here, especially Karl Anthony Towns. He's too expensive. The whole point was to get something cheaper, not super expensive. I'm kind of, disappointed. The Warriors could have done better this year than they have. I think, like what Dan has been doing the last few weeks, like he's been screaming for Trayce Jackson-Davis to start. And I think the last 2 days, games showed he should have started since November. And for whatever reason, they've been holding him back. I don't believe Draymond was the best defender. It was Trayce Jackson-Davis since the day he got drafted. And so I don't know what's going on with their delays, their hesitancy. They don't really want to make the playoffs or whatever, playing politics. The Warriors didn't really want to do anything this year because they had the talent and they didn't really go with the young talent. Draymond can't even hit a layup. I don't know why everybody's confused what's going on with Draymond. So I'm just irritated with Steve Kerr and company. Thank you.
Interesting, Steel Toe. I think, look, there's a lot of things to be frustrated with, but I think the problem or the question we're trying to answer on the other side, and again, 888-957-9570, is there a player or a kind of player that you believe could come in and fit and help move the Warriors in the right direction? I don't think there's a move out there that is all of a sudden going to put the Warriors back into title contention or clear-cut favorites from the NBA Finals. But there could be a move out there, acquiring a big boy, a young and up-and-comer, a reclamation project that paired with Curry and the rest of this roster could make the Warriors an enticing team and perhaps a dark horse heading into next season. If there's a player out there that you believe is acquirable, we want to hear from you at 888-957-9570. Got a half hour left before noon on Warriors this week. Dan Devone, Evan Giddings, back with you after this on 95.7 The Game.
I'm David.
I'm John. And I'm Chris. We're the three brothers that own Jack's Restaurant and Bar with 5 locations in the Bay Area.
We learn the restaurant.
Now back to Warriors This Week on 95.7 The Game.
Evan Giddings, Dan Devone, half hour left until noon, as always, Saturday mornings on 95.7 The Game. I mean, I know you're out of New York a lot, so you kind of understand the vibe. I thought we were going to have to break up a cat fight in the producer room. We got a Yankees fan and a Mets fan back there, Ken and Justin. You guys doing all right?
Yeah, we're being peaceful.
Yankees and the Mets running things here.
Remember to go cleats up, all right? Cleats up going into second base. No, Dan, what we're talking about now is trying to, not necessarily correct this season, and it's going to go the way it goes. You got 9 games left, game and a half out of 9th, a game up on Houston for 10th. Play-in elimination game is probably the destination for the Golden State Warriors, who are now 5 games above 500. But is there a correction this summer out there for Golden State? That's the question we're trying to answer right now at 888-957-9570. I think someone along the lines of Karl Anthony Towns, who is going to be paid big money, a team that might want to move off him in Minnesota. Brandon Ingram's a solid player. They might be looking to acquire a different piece for that up-and-coming, younger group. But I think it's one of those kinds of guys, right? It's one of those guys where that's not a perfect player, but you're hoping you can get him in here.
Donovan Mitchell could be
and get
available.
the most. Maybe Donovan Mitchell, I would love, but that's a guy who'd be pretty expensive.
Well, yeah,
literally.
So I guess the only way you would have some level of balance here is that you're going to have to remove the contracts of some of the people that you had mentioned, namely Andrew Wiggins, namely.
Kuminga's involved in all of those.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. No, he is. He's gone.
Like, best case scenario to me is you find a piece that can help you this summer and keep Kuminga.
With Kuminga as being an asset thrown into all of that, if even that's enough, Ev.
Might not be. I mean, you're going to have to pay heavy in terms of draft compensation, and that might not be something that people want to do because the future of where this thing is going, you might want picks. I mean, heck, the fact that Dunleavy, I think, hit on his first 2 draft picks might also make you believe that those picks could be more valuable than the player that you go out and bring in if it also costs you Kuminga, if it also costs you multiple first-round picks, if it also costs you handing that player a big contract or acquiring another albatross contract. That might not be enough for a lot of people. But let's get out to, let's go to one of your favorites, Dan. Robin is in San Francisco. Robin, how are you? What's going on?
I'm fine. How are you guys this morning? So there was a few callers back. So you know what? I can't stand. We don't have a Draymond problem. Are you serious? Are you serious? That's like I tell my son to stop spoiling my granddaughter because she gets away with murder. She just does. And then she comes to me and tries to do it, and I have to let her know I'm not the one, little girl. Okay, you will not with me. And she's only 3. What I look like? Okay, so we need to stop. We need to stop that. We do got a Draymond problem, and it's an attitude problem, and that passes on, and then that also makes others think, say for whoever get in a position to get stars or whatever, that they can carry on and do anything because Golden State were pacified. I just don't get it, and I just don't get fans who continue to justify Draymond Green's nonsense. And then the second thing I want to say, and these are particular to your callers, you said that, no, we never got superstars. Well, we really didn't. And under Cohan, we traded them away, for like some people like I'm serious, like Joe Barry Carroll. Oh my God, it was a nightmare. And so when we did finally get a superstar, we didn't appreciate him. We didn't treat him like he was a superstar. He was just glad to be here. The media ran him off. Draymond ran him off since we don't have a Draymond problem. I mean, come on, people, be realistic. We have amnesia so quickly. Now we're sitting up trying to fill in, what stars, positions would be great for this. I mean, first of all, you got to look at, can Karl Anthony, we like the bigs to pass, and that pick and roll that Bogut and Curry is doing. Is Karl Anthony Townsend capable of doing it? All these players, I like Brandon Ingram, but can they all play motion ball? If you look at if you look at Wiggins, Moody, and someone else was saying, they basically are the one-on-one ball players. They kind of get left out a little because they get left out of the motion ball. Not only that, it was said last night with some of our positions, they simply don't have. Like Moody, people want to blame Kurt that Moody's not on the floor. Well, then that means but then they want to compare and say and accuse him of being somewhat racist because he's playing Pajinski. They don't even play the same damn position. What are you guys thinking here? It would be Andrew Wiggins. Is Moody's problem of getting on the floor. You dig what I'm saying? So they kind of got a lot of talent there, but they got talent that clashes in positions where they can't get on the floor to develop them. I mean, sometimes some of these callers, they just have no brains. Peace out, guys.
Thanks, Robin. Yeah, I mean, look, if we're trying to find a superstar.
I like it when Robin takes after the callers and not us.
Well, she's just going right down the line. Kind of like, you see Kelly Oubre the other night?
Yeah.
Go down the line of referees.
Yeah.
Said, you're not a nice person. Yeah. You're not a nice person. You're not a nice person. I feel like that was the call.
But he apologized afterwards because I saw people comparing and contrasting what it is that Kelly Oubre did in his apology and then Draymond's inability to apologize.
Yeah, lack thereof. Let's keep it rolling. Mark's in San Francisco. Mark, what's going on? You're on with Dan and Evan on 95.7 The Game. How are you?
Yes, gentlemen. I think Moses Moody is the kind of guy you want on your team. He's got great character, he works hard on defense. This is the kind of guy, you don't want to trade a guy like that. He comes to play every night. That's the kind of guy you want to build your team with players like him. He's a great example. And the problem with Draymond Green is if his mind was into winning, that'd be one thing, but it seems that it's not his priority, unfortunately. So, guy like Moses Moody, you build it with a guy like that.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, I mean, I think Moody's a nice player. This is kind of the problem with a lot of players on the Warriors is I don't look at Moody as being someone who's much of an offensive threat. I think he's a hustle player. He plays hard. He's long. He's got tools, but he's shooting 34% from three-point range. Like, that's not going to help you stay on the floor. Even though he went 4 or 5 last night, he's too inconsistent for me right now. And kind of what you were talking about, like the way that I set it up last week when we were at Freedman's Appliance after you guys, and Sterling did a really nice job, is that the Warriors, their two most important players moving forward are age 36 and age 21. It's a 15-year gap. You kind of, at some point, are going to have to choose which direction you lean towards. And it's always been Curry. Curry's the reason that everything right now, there's a reason they got a building there in Mission Bay. But at some point, you're going to have to think if you need to start leaning in the other direction. And that might be this summer, depending on how the final 9 games go.
When it comes to Moody, I think he's a perfect example of what it is that I've been talking about. Yeah, he's a nice player. Yes, you'd like to have him. But the conversation is not about Moody. It's not about these guys coming off the bench that play hard. This is about getting players that move the needle. Karl Anthony Towns, the Brandon Ingrams, the Donovan Mitchells that we've discussed. The idea of talking about Moody, yes, he's a good player, and we all like him, right? Because he keeps his nose clean. He's got a little Kevon Looney in him. He doesn't say anything. Like the guy, good personality. But that's just, we're wasting energy when we're talking about improving the basketball team and Moses Moody comes to the forefront. That has nothing to do in terms of whether this team is going to take a step forward or not. He will be what he is on his best days, and that is a supporting player, part of the supporting cast, which is good. Yeah, like to have him. But if you really to dig deep and you want to get into the meat and potatoes of this basketball team, well, then you have to look at getting somebody who can play along Steph. Again, that is a bona fide stamped as a star in this league, and that ain't Moses Moody.
No, I mean, I don't think it is, but I don't think it's out of the question for him to be a contributing member of a good team. And that's going to take time. Just like if people assume Jonathan Kuminga is all of a sudden going to be a superstar, you probably got to pump the brakes. Like, it's not going to happen. And one thing that, there are areas that both of those players just need to improve in. Like, Moses Moody's got to be a better, consistent three-point shooter. I think Kuminga's got to be a better rebounder. That takes time. And the issue is that the Warriors are kind of running out of time. And the time being what Steph has left or how good he is. And so that's the conundrum or the rock and hard place they find themselves between. And I do think you're right that it's going to take some risk. it's going to try and acquire a guy who is in their prime that is at least someone that you know what you're going to get. Like Karl Anthony Towns might not be the best player out there, but I know that he's going to shoot 40% from three. I know that he's going to be a 7-footer. He's going to block a couple shots. He's going to give you 20 and 10. Is that going to be the difference in why the Warriors all of a sudden go and win their 5th title? Probably not, but it's better than the alternative, which is, again, this cannot be the same roster next year.
No.
It's been the roster this way for 2 seasons, and you can make the case it might have been 2 seasons too long.
And it's basically the same record.
Yeah.
This is a team that got in as the 6th seed, 6 games over 500. They're probably going to finish around 5 or 6 games over 500 and maybe not even get in as a 10.
No Cap's in Virginia. What's going on, No Cap? You're on Warriors This Week in 95.7 The Game. How are you?
I'm doing good, guys. So I got a couple things. So I listened to the TK pod with Joe Lacob saying he wants to get out of the tax.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a horrible idea. They need to flip Chris Paul for 2 rotation players or just an actual star. Also, Draymond Green, I think he needs to be traded. The Celtics traded Marcus Smart, who was the longest tenured Celtic, and they said he was the heart and soul of the team. And they traded him, and they're at a 1 seed. Okay. And Towns, I think, will be good. And also, I would look at DeMar DeRozan. I think you can get him for a first-round pick. Yeah. So that would be what I would do. But getting out of the tax is not the right answer. Appreciate it, guys.
Thanks, No Cap. Yeah, I mean, I would love to see them continuing to spend money, but at the same time, Joe Lacob's footed the largest tax bill in NBA history now, I think, a few seasons in a row. And if this team's a 10 seed, if they don't even make the playoffs, I don't know how you could pitch to your shareholders that we're going to keep footing this enormous bill for a team that is not going to be in the same place it was.
Evan, when it comes to the tax and when it comes to the luxury tax and the Warriors' salaries, my simple reply is, it ain't my money. That doesn't keep me up at night. Like, that's for you to worry about, Joe Lacob. I don't care how far he is over the tax limit if the Warriors are playing well. Like, that doesn't bother me as a fan, and it shouldn't bother anybody else out there in Dub Nation unless you're invested in the team, unless you're a business partner of that of Joe Lacob, unless you have equity in the team, unless your salary and your bank account is, directly involved and there's a cause and effect with what it is that the Warriors do as far as salaries and tax. Other than that, hell, man, he can afford it.
But if he doesn't want to,
well, that's on him.
Yeah, but I can't judge him when he's spent and moved heaven and earth financially for the last 5 years. You know
I
what I'm
know,
saying?
but I guess what I'm saying is that when we're talking about a prospective player coming to the Golden State Warriors, for us to dive into that's too much money. I'm not bankrolling this thing. If Joe Lacob doesn't want to pay for him, that's on Joe Lacob. But that shouldn't be a concern of mine.
No, it isn't. But the other reality is that if you are above the second apron, you are significantly hamstrung with roster flexibility. Like, you're not just footing a big bill. You also can't access your mid-level exception. There's also, I think, things that involve draft compensation that you're not eligible for. Like, there are reasons why Lacob wants to get under the second apron and the luxury tax, in addition to just, I don't want to spend as much money. And that's the unfortunate part about the NBA implementing that, because it was pretty much aimed at Golden State. Like, you can't just keep paying this bill and keeping these great players and just leave, the breadcrumbs for the rest.
Well, that was the problem, though. It shouldn't have been aimed at the Warriors. The Warriors were just re-upping.
Well, the Warriors and the Clippers, but
what they created. It should have been aimed at those teams that were just simply going out and acquiring the best that the market had to offer, not for the Warriors, who drafted these guys and are just trying to re-sign them. Like, to me, there's clearly two entities that we're talking about here. That going after the Warriors, they went after the Warriors simply because they were the best team in basketball. But I don't think they were disruptive to the system. Make sense?
No, well, they were. So, for example, like, No Cap brings up a really good point about Marcus Smart. So, he doesn't have 4 championships, but he was the emotional leader of the Celtics last year. One of the reasons they got off of him was because Jaylen Brown is making $60 million a year.
Most in the NBA.
You're going to have to pay Tatum this upcoming summer. Yeah. So their goal, in addition to moving off of someone who they felt like, wasn't the biggest piece of the pie, is also because Kristaps Porzingis has an out at the end of this year. We can use his contract to get under the apron. Drew Holiday might not be someone we want to, so it wasn't just Boston moving off of him, but they also had to maneuver themselves. And a lot of teams have quietly been maneuvering themselves to avoid this second apron, not just the Golden State Warriors. 888-957-9570 is the number. Ken, my man, would we be able to bring on Matthew in the city? Matthew in the city, you're up on 95.7 The Game. How are you?
Hey, guys. Thanks for taking my call. Given that, we're at the point here where we have to kind of manage Steph's minutes, there are three players that I thought really intrigued me. One is Cole Anthony. Second one is Anthony Simons. And number three would probably be, to me, like a Patty Mills type player. These are for non-Steph minutes. We need guys who can just be contributing. Another guy I like is the guy from Washington, Tyus Jones, I believe.
Yeah.
I just want to get your thoughts on these three players as people we can add to kind of preserve Steph and kind of, contain his minutes. I'll take my answer off the air.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure any of them are sexy, but I like someone like Tyus Jones.
Again, though,
as a backup point guard.
We're ignoring the 800-pound gorilla in the room. Yeah, the backup point guard to Steph Curry should not be on the forefront of Warriors fans. I don't mean to go after the caller, but that's not what we're talking about here. You could address that, Ev, if everything else is in place. If you got a Karl Anthony Towns and you got Brandon Ingram and you got Steph Curry and you got Jonathan Kuminga and you're ready to go. Now let's think about, hey, how about somebody who can come off the bench and spell? First of all, I would say that they've already answered that this year. That's not necessarily a big concern. Typically in years past, when Steph came off the floor, it's like, oh no, what the hell are we going to do? Let's just tread water till he comes back. But they've been able to answer that adequately. I think whether it's Podziemski or whether it's been Chris Paul or now Klay Thompson, like their bench, especially as it relates to Steph Curry minutes, has done a better than average job this year. But again, we're missing the whole point here. When it comes to the offseason, in terms of priorities, that might be like number 15. I need some boys. And when I say boys, I need some stars.
Hey, who do you guys think about? I know he's not a star. You're talking about big men before, right? And Cat, maybe a stretch. What do you think about Nick Claxton?
I mean, he'd be certainly a lot cheaper than
12 and 10.
Cat.
12 and 10 guy, 24.
I like Nick Claxton. I think he's a good player. I mean, I know someone like Jared Allen was also available at the deadline from Cleveland. Yeah, I mean, I think those players are fine. But quite frankly, you kind of have a cheaper alternative to both of them in Trace Jackson Davis because he's under contract and he's going to cost you a lot less. Nick Claxton might be a better player at this point in his career than TJD is because he's a rookie. But yeah, I mean, I think I'm kind of with Dan. Like, if you're going to make a big move, it can't just be for, I don't know, a player that helps you in one area.
The next time Ken comes in, can we give him a drop? Have you seen Barbie yet?
No, I can't say I have.
Do you have Barbie by chance?
Ken doll? What do you mean?
Yeah, Ken, Barbie.
Yeah.
Because I'm just Ken, right? Anywhere outside.
I feel like you are closer to the.
Do you know how long I've like it took me to finally get off that? Like when I was a kid, that's all I heard. And now, since this Barbie movie has come back, it's haunting. Since I was from ages 7.
The doll?
Yeah, being called Ken doll and things like that.
No, but the song, man. Did you watch the
no, it's great. Great.
You're getting compared to Ryan Gosling. I feel like that's pretty good.
No, yeah. I
knocked it out.
I can't complain about that, but just I'm like, okay, yeah, that's like Barbie. I get it.
We'll get you locked up in Barbie and La La Land too.
Every time Ken comes into the show, we just plays because I'm just Ken.
I'll cut that for you, Dan.
I was going to say,
and if you could rock the pink suit, that'd be nice as well with the
precisely. And then we'll get you on cam because the people need to see that exuberant fit, that 3-piece pink suit. All right, we got about 10 minutes left here. I want to get these calls in. Willie's been hanging on in Concord for a little bit. Let's go to Willie in Concord. What do you think about the Warriors needing a big man?
Yeah, I think it's long overdue. We've been playing small ball for quite a bit, and you guys made a really excellent point earlier where our team is getting older, so it's kind of we got to make a change here. And so my thought was what about getting a big man with mobility? And I was thinking DeAndre Ayton maybe, or I mean, there's so many big men that don't move really well. So it'd be nice to complement the the speed that we play with, right? With a big man that could keep up with it. What are your thoughts on that?
Zach Edey.
Dude, if you want to get slower and you want to get more mobile, I got a 7'4" large man on line 1 from Purdue.
Well, the only problem with DeAndre Ayton is that you get rid of one problem child potentially in Draymond Green. Yes. I don't want anything to do with that dude.
Yeah, DeAndre Ayton, God love him.
Too much dog in that guy.
Not a fan. Kevin's in San Francisco. Cap us off, Kev. What's going on?
Yeah, so I just wanted to follow up on some of your conversations about, with Curry being 36 and he being sort of, you're going to run with him for the next 2-3 years. Mm-hmm. And Kuminga being 21, Wiggins being in between, and you talk about wanting a number 2 who could be a number 2 on a championship team. The guy in the roster who has been that was Wiggins during the most recent championship. He was clearly their second best player. He seems like he's a real sensitive guy, and I'm just wondering, you get rid of Draymond, you move Kuminga for some other piece or pieces, you bring Clay off the bench at a decent contract as a sixth man, and you see if you change the culture so that, Wiggins can step up and be your number 2. Because he's the one guy who's shown he can do that on a championship team. And his age is more consistent with Curry's timeline. He's late 20s.
Thanks, Kev. Yeah, hey, if Wiggins wants to be the second best player on this team, by all means. But if he scores 20 tomorrow night, that'll be the first time this year he scored 20 points in 3 straight games. That's the level of inconsistency.
On to the point. Remember Mike Singletary's rant on Vernon Davis back in 2008 or 9?
Yeah.
You remember that? And that's sort of where I'm at when it comes. Can't do it. I've just seen too much of Andrew Wiggins that if I'm thinking of the offseason and the contract that he has and the disappearing act and the personal problems, I hope he straightens all that out. But when it comes to him, potentially, I'm so tired of he could be that guy. He can go back to 2 years ago. I'm just going to go straight up Mike Singletary. Can't do it. Can't do it anymore. Just can't do it. Can't go there.
Well, the Warriors got a chance to put together a 4-1 road trip with a win tomorrow. San Antonio, by the way, is going to be at 4 o'clock. Warriors live right here, 95.7 the game at 3. Yeah, man. I mean, look, if Wiggins can muster it, that is more than welcome. But I think the evidence, the proof is in the pudding with that, man.
By the way, San Antonio, watch out, man.
See Wemby's like 40 and 20 game.
And talking to the audience again after the game.
Yeah.
Like he grabs the PA mic.
A wasted 61-pointer by Brunson, man. Oh, killed me.
Oh, that's right.
Killed me.
New York back in the house.
Yeah.
Got to throw it in there.
Well, you know what's wrong with the Knicks? I spent time out there. They're just not going to get Randall back and OG and Anunoby's out.
OG should be back soon. They're talking about Randall maybe practicing. Mitch is already back, but that's going to take some time. But I don't know. I'm still holding on to hope.
Yeah, so as we wind down Knicks this week on 95.7.
Let's say
Changing form.
Joe and Yonkers, go ahead.
Yeah. No, appreciate everyone that's chimed in on YouTube and Twitch, powered by First NorCal Credit Union. Thank you so much. Comcast Business Text Line, everyone that's called in. If you're listening on the Odyssey app, check us out there as well. You can go rewind. You can check out every single podcast playlist that we got loaded up on 95.7 The Game. Of course, we also got the game tomorrow. But Dan, my man, glad to be back rocking with you. It's been a couple weeks, but the Big Kahuna's back.
Let's go. We'll see you next week.
We'll talk to you next week. Same time, same place, 9 a.m. Warriors this week, 95.7 The Game. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Warriors will try and get a win tomorrow against the Spurs. Talk to you then.
So, how's your research going?
Surprising. After I figured out the top-rated TVs in our price range, I went shopping for deals.
And who's the best?